ActiveTrack hacks, let's go. Sometimes when you're trying to use ActiveTrack, you get a frame too small message. So what I want to do is enable ActiveTrack for this kind of tower. If I try and come across it like this, we get this frame too small message. So a really quick hack for this is to just zoom in digitally. Now hopefully if I draw a box around that again, it's now able to ActiveTrack it. Now it's tracking it, tap on the zoom and actually go back to your normal zoom. And now we can go and record the clip knowing that ActiveTrack is enabled. You don't have to use the app to use this hack. You can do it from right inside the Pocket 3. Just use the zoom control on the right here to zoom all the way in, then set up ActiveTrack on whatever you want and then digitally zoom back out. Put your Pocket 3 on a bit of smooth paper on a table, make sure it's not going to fall over and use it as a homemade slider. Double tap to activate ActiveTrack, find your starting position and then move the paper as smoothly as possible. Make sure you do it a few times so you can nail it. A variation to this is to move the paper around the subject or use it for a dolly in and out. To get even more buttery smooth movement, shoot at 60 frames a second, 100 or 120 frames a second, slow that footage down in post to try and remove any shakes. You can also use ActiveTrack when you're filming a hyperlapse. I'm going to try a 10 times hyperlapse here, 4K, 25 frames a second. And I'm going to drag a box around this thing to start ActiveTrack. I'm going to hit record. When you're using ActiveTrack, whether you're doing a selfie shot like this or tracking an object, you can reframe the shot. It's going to start tracking and now I can use the 5D joystick to move the shot around. I can move it left and right and a little bit up and a little bit down. For example, I might want to show what's happening in the background there, but tracking is still enabled, so as I move around the frame, it's going to try and keep my face on this side of the image. Attach your Pocket 3 to a selfie stick and use it as a fake drone where normally you wouldn't be allowed to fly. I'll put a link to the selfie stick I'm using here in the video description. Do this at your own risk. The Pocket 3 could easily become unscrewed and fall off and damage it or other people or property. Just gonna tap on this building to ActiveTrack. Then we'll go and do the drone movement. It's gonna extend that selfie stick as far as I can. Trying to do very smooth walk now. We'll see how this looks. You can also create fake crane shots like this, or other interesting shots that make use of parallax. Try enabling ActiveTrack for a fixed object while you're moving, like this shot I took from a boat leaving the harbour where ActiveTrack was tracking the lighthouse, or this shot where I ActiveTracked the tree and just moved around it. Track objects for interesting effects. Leave your Pocket 3 in one place and then start ActiveTrack on an object in the scene. In this example, my camera bag. Then when you move the object around, the Pocket 3 will track it and you get this interesting effect. If the object is too small to track, use the digital zoom hack I showed you earlier in this video. I've been using the Osmo Pocket 3 for 7 months now, and these 10 things I'm about to share are some of the most important things you need to know if you want to make better videos with this camera. The first thing you're going to want to be aware of are the different focus modes. So you're going to want to turn on Pro mode and then scroll down here and tap on focus mode. There's 3 different focus modes you can choose from. You've got continuous, single and product showcase. So continuous mode is the mode you're going to want to use as a general purpose mode, for example when you're vlogging, but the mode we're most interested here is be aware of single shot focus mode. This is super useful in some different scenarios. So let's change to single focus mode. Wherever you tap, that's where the Osmo Pocket 3 is going to focus, and this makes it super easy to pre-focus on a certain area or focus on something that you know is always going to be the same distance from the camera, so you don't have annoying autofocus kicking in when you don't want it. And a really useful use for this, I'll just grab this bottle, is if you're doing sliding shots. What you can do is if you're doing like a reveal or a sliding shot, you can move the camera to wherever you want it to finish, tap on the thing that you want to reveal, then move the Pocket 3 behind the thing. Notice how it's not actually focusing on this. If we had it in continuous mode, this would actually be snapping into focus right now. Then we can just hit record and then perform the reveal or the slide. And you can see how that camera and that tripod is already in focus for us. The second thing you're going to want to know how to use is gimbal lock mode, and this is kind of like a hidden feature. To activate it, you need to hold down the 5D joystick, and when you do that, you get this little icon appearing on the screen here. And when you turn this mode on, it's going to keep the gimbal looking at the same thing. So it's a bit different from ActiveTrack. It's effectively going to lock whatever the picture is on that screen. So let me show you what I mean by this. At the minute, we're just in tilt lock mode, and you can see as I move the Osmo Pocket 3 around, it's kind of following the movements of the handle left and right. Now I'm going to engage the lock by holding down that joystick. Now if I move left and right, it's trying to keep the gimbal pointing straight ahead. And this is really useful, especially when you're doing things like push-ins and pull-outs. If you just want to make sure that the thing that you're moving towards is always going to stay locked. Quick example of that, we'll come back here and I'm going to activate gimbal lock, and then I'm just going to do a push-in, and even if I wiggle the Pocket 3 left and right a bit, it's still pointing towards the thing I'm pushing in on. And the second use for this is, say you were filming a rock concert or a play or something, you can line up the Pocket 3 and get the stage in the position you want on the screen, and then just hold down that 5D joystick, and even if you kind of wriggle or wiggle the Osmo Pocket 3 around, the stage is always going to be locked in the picture. Next up, you're going to want to set up custom presets to make your filming workflow super quick. If I tap on the bottom left, we've got all of the standard built-in Osmo Pocket 3 modes, but if I switch over to the left, notice you've got C1, C2, C3, C4. These are custom filming presets that I've set up. I've got a full tutorial on how to do this, which I'll link to in the description, but really quickly, if you slide down from the top, tap on the top left icon, and then you can set a custom shooting mode. So if I tap this plus icon here, it's going to save all of these settings, including frame rate and the resolution and the white balance. I tip confirm now, tap on the bottom left. Notice now we've got this C5, which is a brand new custom preset that I can really quickly switch to if I want to have different filming presets for different filming locations or situations. Tip 4 is that you're going to want to use the correct gimbal mode for the effect that you're trying to achieve. If you swipe down from the top and tap on this icon here, you get access to the different gimbal modes. The first gimbal mode is follow mode, and this is useful as a general purpose mode, or for example for vlogging or selfies. And with this mode, the camera will follow you around, but it won't change the roll position. Next up, we've got the tilt locked gimbal mode, and this is really useful if you want to always make sure that that horizon stays locked and level. So for example, if you're doing a push in and a pull movement with the tilt lock mode activated, if I'm rotating the gimbal left and right, notice how the image is still staying upright. So you can imagine a horizon there. Tilt lock mode is great if you've got landscapes, or if you're doing panning motions over a landscape and you want to make sure that that horizon doesn't go up and down and look terrible. All right, next up we've got the FPV gimbal mode, and this is the least restrictive or most creative gimbal mode. And you can imagine this having a similar effect as an FPV drone. I'll show you what this looks like, and you can see as I tilt left and right, it's allowing the horizon to move. So I can do a really quick flyby of my studio, and you can see how we're getting that FPV drone-like effect as I twist and tilt the camera. I hope that didn't make you sick. So you can use the FPV mode for like really creative shots. Maybe you're weaving in and out of a live dance performance or something like that. The next gimbal mode is the FPV-L or FPV locked mode. And this is kind of a bit of a weird one and a bit of a tricky one to explain, so I'm not going to go into loads of detail here, but maybe I'll do a future video on that. Tip 5 that pro users of the Osmo Pocket 3 know is that if you're filming slow motion, for example, you tap on the bottom left and scroll across and turn on slow motion mode, when you swipe up from the bottom, you've really only got 100 frames a second or 120 frames a second, and sometimes that slow motion effect might be too slow for what you're actually trying to film. So if you're just filming someone walking maybe, and you want to just slow it down to get the quote cinematic person walking or person thinking effect, 100 or 120 frames a second might be too slow. So instead of using slow motion mode, what we're going to do is we're actually going to go back to normal video mode, and then we're going to swipe up and we're going to choose 50 or maybe 60 frames a second, depending on what your actual frame rate is you're editing in, and then just film in 50 or 60 frames a second. It won't create a slow motion effect in the video file you get out of the Pocket 3, but you can just use your video editing software to slow it down to get that not quite as slow motion effect. The next thing you're really going to want to consider, especially if you want to change the colors and do any color grading when you edit your video, is to change the color mode from the standard mode to one of the two other modes. You can do this if you're in pro mode by scrolling down and tapping on color. You've got normal mode or standard mode, you've got HLG mode, which stands for hybrid log gamma, and you've also got D-Log M mode. Normal mode will give you a good looking image straight out of camera, and D-Log M will give you a lower contrast, lower saturated color image that gives you a bit more of a neutral starting point to change the colors and color grade it how you want. And HLG mode also gives you a lot of creative possibilities when you're color grading. I personally use HLG, and there's quite a few different reasons for this, but basically HLG mode is an actual well understood color standard, so it's a lot easier to work with if you want to use standard technical transforms like in DaVinci Resolve. I'm not going to go into loads of details here because I've got a full video on how to color grade HLG in DaVinci Resolve, which I'll link to in the description. Tip 7 is to take control of your exposure. If you swipe across, and you need to be in Pro mode for this, and tap on exposure, there's loads of different ways that you can work with exposure. You have some control over auto exposure, but you're really going to want to get to know manual exposure mode. Here you can set the shutter speed on the left, we're at 1/50th, and the ISO on the right. The benefit of setting exposure manually is that the Pocket 3 is not continuously trying to change the shutter speed or the ISO, and sometimes when it's automatically changing those things, you can get kind of like a slight flickering effect or a noticeable changing of those things as they move around. By setting manual exposure, you're going to eradicate that kind of flickering or that distracting changing of settings, and you're also going to be able to color grade much more easier because the exposure is going to stay the same through the entire shot. When you're setting the ISO, you can set a fixed ISO value, or you can set an auto ISO range. So you kind of have a hybrid there of auto ISO but manual shutter speed. I've got an entire video dedicated to the ins and outs of setting custom exposure, which I'll link to in the description. It doesn't matter whether you're filming with an Osmo Pocket 3, a video camera, or even a phone, my 52 Laws of Video ebook will really help you elevate your videos, and you can read one law a week and implement that into your videos. Read the whole book in one go. It's really up to you. It's a really great way that you can help support me and this channel, and also help support your own development and your own videos by really getting to know a lot of tips really quickly and really practically. Check out the first link in the video description to learn more. Tip 8 is also about taking control, but this time it's about taking control of white balance. You need to be in Pro mode for this, and you can see this WB here, that stands for white balance. You can use auto white balance, where the camera will try to make a best guess of what the white balance should be set to, and there's a few problems with that. The main problem is that the camera is going to be constantly guessing what the white balance should be, so you might see kind of the colors shifting around as you're filming and as you're talking to the camera or filming something. The colors could be constantly shifting a little bit, which usually doesn't look very good. And the second problem with auto white balance is if you do want to do your own color grading, because things could be shifting around a little bit, any color grading changes you make will also shift around because the underlying video is changing. So again, it's really hard to color grade if you've got auto white balance. You can see at the minute the camera thinks that the automatic white balance it should set is 5020 Kelvin. If you tap on the little M, that will switch you over to manual white balance mode, and then you can choose any one of these. But I did want to show you quite a nice little trick, and I've been asked a few times about how to do this. If you're not sure what the white balance should be, what you can do is get a piece of white paper or one of these white balance discs. This is really cool because it actually folds down, and there's also a grey side with focusing on it. I'll put a link to this in the description because this is actually really handy to have. What you do, if you don't know what white balance you should set, change over to auto white balance. I'm going to move the camera over to it. What I'm going to do, just make sure that it's filling up most of the frame. Come back into your white balance settings, and you can see now that the auto white balance setting is picking this up as 5020. If I take a little light here and just turn this on and shine this on the disc, this light is currently set to 3200 Kelvin, which is a yellow light. And you can see as soon as I shine this light on this white disc, the camera is changing its auto white balance recommendation. So what you can do is you can just switch to auto white balance, put one of these white discs in front of the camera, take a note of what this setting is, it's saying about 4900, and then switch over to manual mode and then set the manual white balance to what the auto white balance setting had for the white disc. All right, the next setting you're going to want to turn on is if you're using the DJI Mic 2 to get your audio into your Osmo Pocket 3, there's a really useful and important setting that you might want to take a look at. So swipe down from the top, tap on the little nut icon to get to the settings, and then scroll down until you see this built-in mic audio backup setting. Tap on that and make sure this is turned on. And what this will do is it will actually save a separate WAV file on your SD card, which will record audio from the built-in microphones on the Osmo Pocket 3, even if you're using a DJI Mic 2 wireless transmitter. And what this means is you've got another backup audio on the actual Osmo Pocket 3 if something went wrong with this and it stopped recording or it stopped transmitting. You've at least got a second backup copy of the audio from the built-in mics, but you can also use this for another purpose, and that's even if you're recording with your wireless microphone and everything's fine, you can mix in some sounds from around the camera as a separate audio track in your editing software to add a little bit of extra ambient audio for the location that you're filming in. The last tip I've got for you is also to do with audio, and what if you're not using a wireless microphone? Well, what you can do is you can swipe across from the right and tap on this little microphone icon to get access to the settings for the built-in microphones on the Pocket 3. What you want to do is make sure you take control of this setting here. This is the directional audio setting, and it allows you to choose which of the 3 microphones built into the Osmo Pocket 3 you're going to get sound recorded from. So by default, this is set to all. It's going to pick up sound from all 3 microphones, and it's going to give you a blend of all of those sounds from all around your Osmo Pocket 3 camera. Sometimes you might not want that though. For example, if there's a lot of wind noise coming from the side of the camera blowing into the side microphones, you might want to set this to front or front and back. In those modes, it's not going to pick up sounds from the left and right of the camera, only from the front and back. Also, this is quite a useful mode if you're just vlogging with the camera and you want to pick up the audio coming from your mouth and not from all around the camera. Hi there, so the Osmo Pocket 3 is a super fun camera to use, but unfortunately it's quite easy to make boring looking videos with it. It's so quick and easy to just pick it up and get started filmmaking that it's really easy to make films or videos that just consist of one long boring shot or multiple shots that all kind of look the same. Just keeping my eye out for snakes here. So not only do you miss out on even more fun filming with the Osmo Pocket 3, you also run the risk of making videos that are actually uninteresting to watch, so people won't even watch them. And that's what I'm going to show you how to fix in this video. What we're talking about here is thinking more in terms of filming a scene or a sequence and being essentially more intentional with what you're filming with your Osmo Pocket 3. I call this the 3-2-1 filming method. The 3 stands for the 3 basic shot sizes that you should always capture. The 2 stands for the 2 changes you should make between each shot. And the 1 is the extra or the bonus shot type that you should always remember to capture that's going to make your life easier. Try not to fall in the ocean. The first of the 3 shot sizes is the wide shot or the establishing shot. This is where you want to set the scene for the scene or the sequence that you're filming and really give the viewer an idea of where you are and potentially what's going to happen. So in this scene I'm going to be filming on this beach, just going to turn you around, and so for the wide shot or the establishing shot for this scene or this sequence, we're just going to do a slow pan across this beach. Just remember that in the wide shot or the establishing shot you don't have to show everything as wide as possible, but you want to show it wide enough to show anything that's important to the scene or the sequence that you're going to be filming. The second shot of the 3 shots that you should always capture is the medium shot. So as its name suggests, this is kind of like a medium view. You're going to mostly see most of the body of the person that you're filming, or yourself if that's what you're filming, and it's kind of halfway between the extra wide shot that we just captured and the next shot I'm going to show you. The third shot size that you should always try and capture is the close-up shot, so something like this where my face is mostly filling the frame and you can't really see much about what's going in the background, but you can kind of roughly guess that we're in the same location. In proper filmmaking terms, there's loads of different shot sizes, but I'm just keeping it simple for this video. Part 2 of the 3-2-1 method is all about what you need to change between each subsequent shot that you're intending to edit together. So the first thing you need to change between each shot is the shot size, so wide, medium or close up. And the second thing you need to change between each shot that you're going to edit together is the shot angle. So why is this a good idea? Well, because when you edit those shots together, it's going to seem more interesting to watch, and it's also going to seem more intentional, and in some ways it's actually going to seem smoother than just having one continuous shot or putting jump cuts between each edit point. While I've got you on the tripod, let me give you a quick example of this. So say the first shot you want to have maybe a close-up like this, and then you're going to switch to another shot. So we can just change the shot size because we don't have a zoom lens on the Pocket 3. We can change the shot size by just moving about the frame. So now we've gone from that close-up to more of a medium shot. But if I just edit those two things together so you can see the difference or the jump or the jar, and now I'm going to edit those same two things together again, and I'm also going to change the camera angle. I'm going to try and move it at least 45 degrees, and you can kind of see, because we've changed both the shot size and the camera angle, we get a more pleasing, a more interesting and a less jarring cut in the edit. The 1 in the 3-2-1 method is the extra shot that you should always try and capture because it's going to make your editing life so much easier, and that's the cutaway cutaway shot. A cutaway shot is something that you can film that's kind of related to what's going on, but not too tightly related, that you can insert anywhere in your edit. All right, let's go and put together a quick sequence utilizing all of those 3, 2, 1 rules so you can see it in action.
Red was in blue skies. What did we know? We were so very young.
So you can be filming in 4K, have the best location and the best editing, but if your audio is garbage or people can't hear what you're saying, they're not going to keep watching. By the end of this video, expect to learn how to get the best from the built-in mics on the Pocket 3, the secret setting for recording even more audio tracks, the trick to recording audio even when you're filming in slow motion modes, and how to use DJI Mic 2 with the Pocket 3 for outstanding audio. Let's start off by talking about the internal microphones built into the Pocket 3. So there's 3 microphones on the Pocket 3, one just here, and then also one on each side. There, just there. There's not a microphone on the side where the screen is. The first tip I've got for you is to not block these holes when you're holding the Pocket 3. So it's pretty easy, especially if you're not using any of the extensions, to accidentally hold the Pocket 3 with your fingers over these holes and partially blocking this microphone at the front. If you do that, the internal audio is going to sound pretty rubbish because you're blocking the microphones. One easy way to help prevent that is to just use the extension handle. This comes with the Creator Combo. So now it's a lot easier to hold the Pocket 3 at the bottom and not accidentally move your hand so far up that it's going to cover those microphones. Even better, screw in the little tripod. Now you've got even less chance of covering up those microphones. So if you are using the internal mics on the Pocket 3 to record your audio, there's one really important setting that you really need to know about. First thing you need to do is swipe from the right, and then you're going to have to tap on Pro to enable Pro mode to get to this setting, and then tap the little microphone icon. And that's going to bring up the settings for the internal microphone. And the setting I'm talking about is this setting at the bottom, this direction. This is the directional audio, or in other words, which of the microphones will actually pick up sound while you're recording. By default, this is set to all. That means it's going to pick up sound from all around the Pocket 3. There's 2 more settings that you can change this to. The first is front, and that means that the Pocket 3 is only going to use the front microphone to pick up sound. And the other option is front and back. It will focus sound from the front and behind the Pocket 3. Changing this setting can have a massive difference on the quality of the audio depending on the location that you're filming in. Let me show you a couple of examples. This is what it sounds like with the microphone direction set to all around when you're using the internal mics. And this is what it sounds like with the internal mic direction set to front only. And this is what it sounds like with the mic direction set to front and back. This is what it sounds like with the internal mic set to direction being all around, so it's picking up sounds from all around the Pocket 3 on all of those microphones. And this is what it sounds like with that direction set to front only. So this is what it sounds like with the direction set to front and back. So it shouldn't be picking up too much of that side noise, just whatever's coming from in front and behind of the Osmo Pocket 3. There's a couple of other settings that it's useful to know about here. The first is this channel. You can change this between mono and stereo. Most of the time you're probably going to have this set to stereo unless you're specifically recording some dialogue, for example. And the other setting is this wind noise reduction. If you get a lot of wind noise sound on the internal microphones, if it's very windy outside, then you might try turning this on. Just be aware though, sometimes it can kind of make the audio sound a bit weird, and you can try and get rid of some of this wind noise in post-production. For example, in DaVinci Resolve, you can use the voice isolator and try and isolate things that way. So normally I'm going to have this set to off and directional audio set to all, unless I need to change them. By the way, if this is your first time here, hi, I'm Jason. This channel is all about making better looking, better sounding and better edited videos. If that's something that's interesting to you, please subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. All right, next let's take a look at the secret setting that can kind of turn the Osmo Pocket 3 into a multi-track recorder. You can use this feature to get extra ambient audio wave files that you can use when you're editing your video. To turn on this setting, you need to swipe down from the top and tap the little nut icon, and then just scroll down until you see built-in mic audio backup. Tap this and then slide this toggle to enable this feature. And you can see down the bottom here we've got a few limitations. This feature won't work in low light mode at 4K 30 or 25 or slow-mo mode at 4K 120 D-Log-M or HLG. This mode makes a bit more sense when you're using something like the DJI Mic 2 in conjunction with the Pocket 3, but we'll get to that in a minute. When you've got this turned on, anytime you record a video, you're going to get a separate wave file alongside the video file, and the video file's still going to have the audio in it. And what you can do is you can mix mix in the ambient audio from this extra audio file into your overall video, and it gives you control over the soundscape. Let me show you what I mean. So I've got the Pocket 3 set up on a tripod there, and it's kind of close to the ocean. Just going to walk back a bit. So now I'm recording the main audio using the DJI Mic 2 wireless mic. I'm also recording internally as a backup, but I'm also recording at the same time separate audio files from the Pocket 3's internal microphones. What I can do now is I can mix in that ambient audio that the Pocket 3 microphones are recording alongside the main audio that I'm recording with the DJI Mic 2 here. And that just gives us more options when we're mixing the audio together to create a more immersive soundscape in our videos. To make use of these extra audio files when you're editing, first of all, copy all the files from the SD card onto your computer and then edit the video as you would ordinarily, but also use the extra audio file on a separate audio track and then use whatever video editing software features you like to mix in that audio, raise the volume, lower the volume of that extra audio file to create a nice ambient sound in your videos. So you're also probably going to want great music, and this is not a sponsored video, but I've been using Epidemic Sound for almost 5 years now. If you want a free trial, check out the first link in the video description. If you're making use of the slow motion mode in the Osmo Pocket 3, you might have noticed that you don't actually get any audio recorded in the video files, but you can actually get access to the audio that was recorded, because when you're using the slow motion mode, it will save a separate audio file alongside the video file. And what you can do is you can import this into your video editing software alongside the slow-mo video. And one way you can use this audio file is to simply retime it to the same length as the video file, and of course the audio is going to sound really sped up and a bit cheesy. 120 frames a second. Or you can just pull out little bits of the audio for certain parts of the slow motion video. If you are thinking about buying a Pocket 3, I would highly recommend you spend the extra bit of money and go for the Creator combo that also includes the DJI Mic 2 transmitter. There's a few reasons for this. The main one is that it's going to allow you to attach the transmitter to yourself, so you can move further away from the Pocket 3 and just get a bit more freedom when you're filming yourself. It also comes with this windshield that you can remove if you're recording inside, for example. But if you're recording outside, this little fluffy windshield helps to reduce some of that wind noise. And if you're still getting a lot of wind noise even with this thing fitted, what you can actually do is use the little magnet, and instead of wearing it on the outside, you can just wear this on the inside of your t-shirt and use the magnet on the outside, and the fabric from your t-shirt or whatever clothing you're wearing will further help reduce some of that wind noise. Also, for more audio options, you don't have to make use of the built-in microphone in these transmitters, because they actually come with a little socket there, so you can attach a wired lav mic to this. Still going to transmit wirelessly to the camera, but for example you could wear this on your belt or something, run a lav mic up inside your t-shirt to further help reduce any wind noise, or in fact just to improve the sound quality if you've got a lav mic that you really like the sound of. So if you do buy the combo pack, which I'll put a link to in the description, the DJI Wireless Mic 2 will automatically come paired with the Osmo Pocket 3, but if you buy this separately, or perhaps you get a second one, you can pair them manually. If you do need to pair one of these DJI Mic 2 transmitters with your Osmo Pocket 3, swipe down from the top to come to the menu, tap on the little nut, tap on wireless mic, and then tap on TX1 or TX2, and it'll give you instructions on how to pair the transmitter with the Osmo Pocket. Just going to turn this DJI Wireless Mic 2 transmitter on, and when I do so, you should see a message on the Pocket 3, which you're doing. Just tap to close that. And you can see this green bar at the top is going up and down as I'm talking. This is your volume level meter for the DJI Mic 2, and you want this to be mostly green, maybe occasionally orange, but never in the red, really. You can change this by swiping over from the right, tapping Pro Mode, and now in the middle tap this little icon which looks like the DJI Mic 2 transmitter. What you're going to want to do is set this transmitter gain to a negative or positive value depending on how loud you're talking or the person that you've got the mic attached to is talking. If I max this out all the way up to +12 and head back in here, you can see now that this bar is kind of peaking and into the orange here, but if I talk really loudly, just excuse me for a minute, hi, you can see it peaked into the red there, which is not what we want. So it's just a case of whoever's wearing this, come into the transmitter gain and select a setting that works for you. For my voice, +2 seems to work okay. I could probably go to +4. If you want to mute the transmitter, which means you won't record any audio from it, you can tap this mute option and turn it on. And you've also got this noise reduction option, You can turn that on if you're filming in a noisy environment, maybe there's lots of background hum or background noise or something like that. You can turn it on, but once again, just like the wind noise reduction, sometimes it might make things sound a bit strange, and you've probably got better options for doing this in your video editing software. So I normally have this turned off. When you're using the DJI Mic 2, there's a few other settings that you should be aware of. To get access to these, you need to swipe down from the top, tap the settings nut, tap wireless mic, and then scroll down. So you can turn on and off the LEDs on a transmitter, just if you want a more stealthy look. You can turn on and off the vibration, and you get vibration on the transmitter for things like powering off or powering on or setting certain settings. I normally leave vibration on as it's a good safeguard in case you accidentally turn it off. Audio to video sync will automatically start internal recording on the transmitter when you hit record on the Pocket 3. I normally just hit record manually on the transmitter, so it's recording everything. You can record hours and hours on the internal recording, so it's not usually a problem. If you want to, you can change the internal recording of the files on the transmitter to be 32-bit float. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically a way of encoding the audio data that's saved on the transmitter, and it can help prevent overloaded sounds. If some sounds are too loud, you can still store the data for those sounds. It won't actually prevent you overloading the microphone if you were to shout really loudly into this microphone, or maybe put this microphone on the exhaust pipe of a Mustang V8, of course. You can turn on this auto power off feature. This will turn off the transmitter after a certain amount of time inactive. And you can format the transmitter, which will erase all of the internal files on this transmitter. Have a listen to these two clips next, one shot using the internal mics and one shot using the DJI Mic 2. So this is what the audio quality sounds like using the DJI Mic 2. And this is what the audio quality sounds like using the built-in mics on the Osmo Pocket 3. Hi there, when you're out recording with your Osmo Pocket 3, you don't really want the same bit of video playing for too long. That's because your viewers will probably get bored and stop watching the video. It also doesn't give you many creative options or possibilities when it comes to editing your video together. Right, so say I'm setting up this tracking shot, I'm just going to drag around my face to start ActiveTrack. And in this shot, I'm just going to be walking away from the camera. But the problem with this shot, as I'm walking away, this shot's kind of taking a bit too long. And in the edit that you're watching right now, it's going to start to feel a little bit boring and a little bit tedious. All right, let me show you a second edit and see what you think. You can see how that version of the edit didn't feel quite as long or boring. That's because I inserted another shot in the middle of the main shot, the video of my feet walking. This is known as a cutaway shot. I'll give you some examples of cutaway shots in just a second. Some quite nice side lighting going on at the minute. So what is a cutaway shot? Well, a cutaway shot is going to give you the benefit when you're editing your video of letting you change the length or the order of the sequence in the edit. You can insert the cutaway shot wherever you want in the main bit of video. And by the way, cutaways are also the easiest thing to forget to film when you're out shooting. A cutaway should be related to the main shot that you're filming, but it shouldn't be tightly visually connected to the main shot. You want to be able to have a bit of flexibility where you insert it. If these birds will ever shut up. Basically, a cutaway shot should be able to be inserted anywhere you want in the video or in the main sequence without it seeming odd or out of place. Oh, and as a bonus tip, cutaways are really useful for hiding jump cuts in videos. Oh, and if this is the first time we're meeting, hi, I'm Jason. This channel's all about making better looking, better sounding and better edited videos. If that's something that's interesting to you, please subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Some other examples of cutaway shots for this sequence could be, for example, let me just turn you around, some bushes or trees blowing in the wind like this. Could be a detail shot of some bark on a tree like this. Or you could even cut to a wide shot like this and then cut back to the main action. Hi there, by taking control of your Osmo Pocket 3's exposure, you can create more professional and more beautiful looking videos. Expect to learn the 3 ways that you can control exposure, how to be strict or relaxed with ISO, how to film movie-like videos that don't look too harsh, and 3 ways you can check your exposure. The first way to control exposure is by changing the ISO setting. So what you're going to want to do is swipe over from the right and then tap Pro to turn on Pro mode. Tap on exposure and you want to make sure that this is set to manual. This is that M highlighted. You can use auto exposure, but we're going to concentrate on manual exposure in this video. And you can change the ISO by swiping up and down on the right hand side here. The lower the ISO, the darker the video will be, and the higher the ISO, the brighter the video will be. A higher ISO value also means that you might get more noise in the image, so you should be aware of that and always always try and use the lowest possible ISO you can. So you can set a fixed ISO value. These are these single numbers, for example 200 ISO, and when you do this the camera's not going to change that ISO value, it's going to be stuck at whatever you set. Use this mode when you're staying in the same lighting conditions. For example, you're filming inside in the same space, or maybe you're outside on a clear sunny day where the light's not changing. As well as the fixed ISO, you can also select auto ISO, and you do that by selecting one of these ranges. You can see we've got a range of 50 to 100 ISO, and you can scroll through these different ranges all the way up to 50 to 6400 ISO. You can think of this as a more loose ISO setting. So if you wanted to limit the upper end of the ISO, say you never wanted to go over 800 ISO, you could set 50 to 800. In this mode, the camera's automatically going to change the ISO between 50 and 800 depending on the lighting conditions, and you might want to use this mode if the lighting conditions are changing quite a lot while you're filming. For example, if you're out on a bright sunny day but the clouds keep coming over the sun, or perhaps you're walking through trees in a lot of shade and then out into the bright sunlight and then back into shade. As an alternative, you could just set a fixed ISO value and then just have that effect of things going brighter and darker as you're moving, if that's what you want. The second way to control exposure is to change the shutter speed. You can do that by changing the values on the left. A faster shutter speed makes the video go darker. That's a bigger number on the right hand side of the one, and a smaller number or a slower shutter speed makes the video go brighter. You should also be aware that the shutter speed will affect how your video looks and feels. A really high shutter speed will make your video feel more digital and a bit harsh looking. There is a magic number to set your shutter speed to if you want that movie-like feel, and we'll get to that in just a second. If we change the ISO to a fixed ISO setting, say ISO 200, and then we can alter the shutter speed, but if we're using one of the automatic ISO ranges, we can still choose the shutter speed, let's say 1/50th, but we can tap on this EV item at the top in yellow, and now notice this side menu changes to these EV values. A positive EV value means that you want the image to be brighter than the camera thinks it should be, and if you set a negative EV value, it means you want the image to be darker than the camera thinks it needs to be. As I change this value at the top right here, the automatic ISO value is changing, but you can see at the top here the shutter speed is staying fixed at that 1/50th that we set. You can use this EV compensation mode when you're using those auto ISO ranges, just to be sure that while the camera's automatically switching the ISO, it never goes too bright or it never goes too dark depending on what you're shooting. The third way to control exposure is to fit a filter on the front of your lens to darken the image, a bit like wearing a pair of sunglasses. This kind of filter is called an ND filter, and you can get fixed strength ND filters, or you can get variable strength ND filters like this. A variable ND filter has a little disc on the front, and as you turn it, it gets brighter or darker. So now you know a few of the different ways you can actually control the exposure. How do you actually check the exposure that you're setting? The first method is to simply just look at the screen and see how it looks, but this is not always ideal. It's not really going to give you a very good idea if you're filming outside in bright weather and there's a lot of sunlight shining on that screen. It might be hard to tell how bright or how dark the actual image you're recording is. The next best thing after simply looking at the screen is to use the EV value reading. So if we come back to the Pocket 3, you can see at the top right we've got this EV value, and you can think of this as a meter reading. It's what the camera thinks the exposure should be. At the minute you can see this is 0.0, which essentially means the Pocket 3 is telling us that it thinks the exposure is, quote, perfect. If we had a plus EV value here, say +2, then the camera would think we're 2 stops overexposed and the image is too bright. If you saw an exposure value here of -2, it would mean that the camera thinks that the image is way too dark or 2 stops underexposed. The thing to be aware of with this EV reading is that it's not always 100% reliable. For example, if there's strong backlight in the scene, a person standing in front of a bright window or a person standing with a bright sunset behind them, the camera is going to not always be able to work out what should be exposed and what shouldn't be exposed properly. You might find that the sunset looks really nice, but the person's face is really dark. You also get this EV reading when you're setting exposure, and we'll go into a fixed ISO mode. And you can see if I set 50 ISO, this EV reading at the top is -3, so the camera thinks we're 3 stops underexposed, which means everything's going to be too dark. As I increase the ISO, You can see this EV reading increases. It's now negative 1.3. And if we increase the ISO to 800, it's now plus 0.3. So it's saying maybe we're a little bit overexposed. If we continue to increase the ISO, we're up to 6400. It's now telling us that it thinks it's 2.3 stops overexposed. So using this EV value is the first way to check exposure. Methods 2 and 3 require you to use the Mimo app and connect to your Pocket 3. So here we are in the DJI Mimo app. The first method to check exposure is to tap on the 3 dots at the bottom left here and then scroll down and turn on this overexposure alert. What that's going to do is it's going to put these zebra lines on the screen where it thinks the image is overexposed. What this means is these zebra lines will possibly be completely overexposed. They'll be completely white and any detail in those areas might be completely lost and we might not be able to get it back when we're editing the video. If those areas were really important to us, then we'd want to go and modify the exposure. For example, we could change the ISO, maybe drop that to 200. The zebras have disappeared on most of the image. We're still getting them on these 3 squares here, but we might say that that's actually not important information and we're doing the best we can not to completely overexpose those other important areas. The third way you can check exposure is to once again tap on these 3 buttons at the bottom and turn on this histogram. We've got this histogram and we can move this around the screen. This histogram gives us an idea of the distribution of light and dark. On the left of the histogram here, this represents darker parts of the image, and on the right it represents brighter parts of the image. In the middle of the histogram shows you the middle areas of brightness. Let me go and change the exposure and watch what happens to the histogram. As we increase the ISO, the image gets brighter, and if we increase it again, it gets brighter still, and if we increase it again, and if we go all the way up to 6400, you can see that we've got this peak right on the right hand side, meaning that a lot of that information is going off and becoming too bright and overexposed. So you can use the histogram in conjunction with the zebras to give you a really good idea of the overall exposure. We'll just go fix that. In this case, I'm going to say we don't care about those white areas with the zebras. The more even the histogram is, the more evenly distributed the bright and dark areas are, but you're not always going to be able to get a nice distribution all the way across that histogram, especially if you're filming scenes that have got really big dynamic range, really bright part over here, really dark part over here. To get your Osmo Pocket 3 footage looking more like a movie, you need to control the shutter speed. To get that true cinema feeling, you want to set your shutter speed to 24 frames a second, but you can also use 25 or 30 if that's your preference. The next thing you want to do is set the shutter speed. We'll come back into our exposure. Now what you want to do here is you want to set your shutter speed to be roughly double whatever frame rate you've chosen. We're currently recording at 24 frames a second. We need to set a shutter speed of 1/48. The closest we can get in the Pocket 3 is 1/50th. If we were using 30 frames a second, then we'd want to set this to be 1/60th. The shutter speed is going to stay fixed to this value. What that means is we've only got 2 other ways to control the exposure. One is the ISO and 2 is to use an ND filter. If your image is too dark, we could increase the ISO to make the image brighter and get the correct exposure. Or if you have lights in a studio setting, you can just turn up the brightness of the light to get the correct exposure. If the exposure is too bright, you're going to need to turn down the ISO. You can only go as low as 50 ISO in the Pocket 3. If 50 ISO is still too bright, then you can either turn down the light, but if you're filming outside, you can't turn down the sun. In that case, you're going to have to fit an ND filter to the front of the Pocket 3. Yes, it's got ActiveTrack. Yes, it's got gimbal stabilization. Yes, it fits in your pocket. But there's one feature I didn't even think about when I bought my Osmo Pocket 3 that's changed everything. This video is not sponsored by DJI, but this channel is supported by people like you when you buy one of my digital products like my DaVinci Resolve editing ebook, links in the description. As a solo creator, filming yourself can be hard sometimes. You not only have to talk to the camera, you've got to do all of the other things too. Sound person, director, cinematographer, you name it. Let's start off not using this feature, and I'm going to grab a shot of me driving down this track. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the Osmo Pocket 3 on this mini tripod somewhere about here, and it's pretty tricky to actually see what's on the screen because I'm using this tripod. Obviously a bigger tripod would be easier, but that's not really the feature I'm talking about in this video. So I'm gonna switch the camera around and then frame up the shot, something like that. Hopefully looks good. Then I'm gonna jump back in the car and we'll get a shot of me driving down this track and see how it looks. So this is what it looks like from the driver's seat. Right, here we go. Hopefully I won't drive over the Pocket 3. Just going to reverse back up now so we can go and check the footage on the Pocket 3. Check everything looks okay. and check this out. Press stop.
Make a life for myself.
So I didn't really like how that came out. What I'm going to do is go and put the Osmo Pocket 3 back down again. But this time I'm not going to concern myself too much with the composition because I'm going to be making use of this feature that I'm talking about in this video. Let's get back in the car. As a solo creator, you also need great copyright-free music. I've been using Epidemic Sound for almost 5 years now. I'll put a link to a free trial in the description. I'm going to go into my phone and start up the DJI Mimo app. I'm going to tap on device, tap connect, I'm going to tap join, and now we've connected to the Pocket 3, we can go and start using this app. So if I wanted to using this app, I could just drag a box around my car and then start using ActiveTrack and drive through the scene. In this case, I'm not actually going to use ActiveTrack, so I'm going to tap the cross to turn that off. So I can use these on-screen joysticks now to actually move the gimbal around on the Pocket 3 and get the framing that I want. If I want to, I can tap on these three dots at the bottom and change the focus mode. I'm going to change this from continuous to single shot, and then we're going to choose a focus point. So now the focus won't shift as the car drives through the scene. I can also tap these three dots at the bottom, and then if I scroll down here, we can turn on this overexposure alert, and you can see in the clouds there, we're getting a bit of zebras. That's telling us that that part of the scene is overexposed. And also if we tap on the three dots, we can also turn on a histogram to give us another idea of the exposure. And then we can remotely start recording right from the phone without even having to get out of the car and go back to the Pocket 3. Now we're recording, I'm going to start up the car, drive through the scene, and we'll get the shot. By the way, if you're watching this and you're not subscribed, please subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. Just going to drive back and we're going to review that footage. The great thing is I don't even have to get out of the car to review the footage. I'm just going to tap the bottom right play button and then tap on this one. There's three modes you can use on the Pocket 3 to make more interesting looking videos. You've got Hyperlapse, Motionlapse and Timelapse. I've currently got the Pocket 3 attached to this windscreen suction mount here. I thought first of all we could try out the Hyperlapse mode, as this is really useful to use if the camera's moving, like walking or attached to a car. Tap on the bottom left and I'm going to swipe across till we get to the Hyperlapse modes. And if you swipe up from the bottom, you get to choose between Hyperlapse, Timelapse and Motionlapse. So we're going to start off with this Hyperlapse, and you get to choose a rate from auto to 30 times. So I'm going to go get a coffee at the minute, which is going to annoy some of you coffee snobs, of which I am one actually. So let's try a 30 times rate and see how that does, because we've got about a 5-minute drive to get to the coffee shop. Triple tap to move the gimbal to the front, and I'll just use the joystick here to reposition, and then I'll tap record, and now we're recording a Hyperlapse. Hi, can I get a large iced coffee, no sugar, please? Thank you. Coffee check, which is always good. I saw the Pocket 3 wobbling about a bit using this particular mount as I was driving, so I haven't seen the Hyperlapse yet, but I'm assuming it didn't look that great. I could be wrong though. I'm gonna go and try and find another spot, and this time we'll do a walking Hyperlapse and see if it's any better. I also stupidly didn't put any sun cream on today, and it's pretty hot and there's no clouds, which is going to make it a bit challenging to do a time lapse later on, but we'll see what we can do. If you're not familiar with Australia, the sun is hot. The whole point of having these hyperlapse modes, hyperlapse, time lapse and motion lapse modes, is to compress the passage of time into a small amount of actual time. I can see it wobbling there. I've got ActiveTrack on at the minute, so it'll be interesting to see how much ActiveTrack helps with this wobble. I'm guessing not much, judging by the look of that. So there's a walk up there which I think goes to some kind of lookout. I'm going to switch to hyperlapse mode. I'm going to try 2 times hyperlapse this time. It's absolutely gorgeous here. I think hyperlapse mode is the mode that I'm least likely to use, quite honestly. probably make more use of time-lapse and also motion-lapse. So we're going to swipe up from the bottom, and then we're going to switch from Hyperlapse over to motion-lapse. So you can do left to right, right to left, and you can also set custom motion. So I'm going to set custom motion. I'm going to swipe up, and we want to probably go for about a 10-second video, but I want to shoot for 20 minutes just to try and get some movement in those shadows. So if I increase the interval, that will bring us back down to 10 minutes. If I tap the button, just going to clear previous waypoints from a previous shoot. So I'm going to start somewhere around there, tap plus to add the first waypoint, scroll around, tap plus to add the second waypoint, and then just hit record to start recording. It is windy today, so I hope you can hear this okay. The third mode is time-lapse mode, and that's where the camera's not moving or the gimbal's not moving. It's just going to record whatever the gimbal's pointing at. So a common use for this in vlogging is to watch people eat, which I know is pretty offensive sometimes, but it'll serve as a good example. And because I'm too scared to go and eat in a restaurant and talk to camera, I'm going to do it out here in the wind next to a construction site. Got a delicious looking coffee cheesecake here, and also a flat white. Hope that time lapse didn't make you too hungry. The coffee cheesecake was delicious. Had to get back in the car because the wind out there is just crazy and pretty much impossible to record at the minute. So when should you use these three modes? Well, use time lapse if you want the same frame but things moving in the frame. Use hyperlapse if you're actually moving the Osmo Pocket 3 around, and then use motion lapse if the Pocket 3 is stationary but you want to sweep across as the time lapse is happening. Hey everyone, one of the nice things about the Osmo Pocket 3 is you can set up custom filming preset modes so you can get filming even quicker. If this is the first time we're meeting, I'm Jason Roberts, and this channel is all about making better looking, better sounding and better edited video. If that's something that's interesting to you, please subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. All right, let's go and set up some custom preset modes, and later in this video I'm going to show you another bonus tip to make filming even quicker. So you can set up to 5 preset modes in the Osmo Pocket 3. To get access to them, swipe down from the top and then tap on the top left this little person icon. At the minute we don't have any custom presets saved. So let's go and set up our first custom preset. This could be quick and dirty vlogging preset. Just going to tap back and then swipe up to get back to the main settings. So for this vlogging preset, what we're going to do is we're going to swipe up from the bottom, say we want 4K, and we're going to choose 4K 30 for this vlogging preset. Swipe down from the top. For this preset, we're going to be setting it up in a landscape format. Later in the video, I'll show you how to set up portrait or vertical presets. So we're just going to swipe down from the top. We're going to tap this button just to make sure we're in landscape shooting mode. And for this quick and dirty vlogging preset, we're not going to use any pro mode features, so we're going to swipe in from the right. And you can see we don't have this pro mode turned on. We also don't have any glamour effects turned on. If you want those, you can turn them on. I'm not going to bother with those. We're going to tap this image adjustment, and you can use the default settings here, or we're going to choose custom. And for example here, let's say we want -1 sharpness and -1 noise reduction, just to take the edge off that digital feeling of the footage. Tap confirm to save that. And now we've got all the settings we want. We can go and save our first custom preset. To do that, slide down from the top, tap on the top left icon, and just tap the plus button under this C1 icon. You can review the settings here and tap confirm to save that preset. All right, let's go and add preset number 2. This is going to be for a more cinematic or filmic or more controlled filming situations. What we're going to do is swipe up from the bottom. This time we're going to choose 4K 24 as our frame rate and resolution. We're going to leave it in landscape for this. We're not going to use portrait. Swipe in from the right. This time we are going to tap Pro to turn on Pro mode because we want more control in this cinematic setting or this cinematic preset. We're not going to use auto exposure for this because we want more control, so I'm going to tap exposure, and I'm going to tap M to change to manual exposure. For the shutter speed here, we're going to change this to be roughly double the frame rate that we're using. In our case, that's 24 frames a second, so double that is 48. The nearest we've got here is 1/50th. And rather than using any of these auto ISO options, we're going to choose a specific ISO. In this case, let's choose 100 and tap confirm. We also don't want to use auto white balance in this more filmic mode because we're going to be shooting in a more controlled situation in theory. So we're not going to use auto white balance. I'm going to tap white balance. I'm going to tap M to go to manual. And let's say we anticipate that we're going to be shooting outside. So we'll set our manual white balance to 5500 Kelvin, tap confirm. Again, we won't use any glamour effects, but we're going to change the color mode from normal here. We're not going to use HLG, tap it again. We're going to be using D-Log-M. That's because in this cinematic shooting mode, we kind of expect to have to do some color grading to get the best out of what we're trying to achieve. Focus mode, we're going to leave on continuous for now. You can change that if you want. And under image adjustment, let's say we want to get rid of everything that the camera's doing as much as possible. So we're going to have sharpness at -2 and also noise reduction at -2. That means we might have to do some extra work in post, of course. Tap confirm to save that. The good thing about these custom presets is you can also save your microphone settings. I'm going to tap this little microphone icon, and for example, say we want to shoot in stereo, we're going to turn wind noise reduction off because we don't want that doing anything. This mode is all about having maximum control and maximum flexibility in editing. And for the audio here, we could choose all around direction. This is for the internal microphones, but let's say in this example, we're going to change this to front microphones only because we expect what we're filming to be in front of the Pocket 3. All right, let's go and save that. Swipe down from the top, tap the top left icon, and this time we're going to tap plus under C2, review the settings, and then tap confirm. Alright, so once you've set up your presets, how do you switch between them? That's really easy. Tap on the lower left of the screen here, scroll all the way over to the left, and you can see we've got our presets C1 and C2. If I tap on C1, we change to 4K 30, that's our vlogging preset, and if we tap on the lower left and choose C2, now we're very quickly into our more cinematic 24 frames a second preset. And if you want to switch back to normal mode, just tap on the lower left, scroll across, and choose one of these normal modes, like normal video mode. Let's go and set up a vertical or portrait preset now. Swipe down from the top, and then tap this icon until it goes to this portrait icon. Swipe up. You can see now we've switched into vertical filming mode. Swipe up from the bottom to choose your frame rate. Let's say in this instance, we're just going to be shooting 1080, 30 frames a second. And in this example, we're going to swipe across and we're going to turn off pro mode because this is another quick and dirty mode, for example, uploading to TikTok or Reels or something. You can tap on image adjustment. If you want to, you can leave the sharpness at -1 and -1 noise reduction. If that's what you want, tap confirm, and then swipe down from the top. Tap on the top left icon. This time we're saving this as C3. Tap that, tap confirm, and now we've got 3 custom preset modes. To show this in action, I'm just going to switch back to C2, which is our cinematic landscape mode. And if we switch back to C3 that we just created, you can see now we're in vertical or portrait filming mode. I've got that bonus tip coming up for you in just a second. First, I'm going to show you how to delete and update presets. To delete a preset, swipe down from the top and come over to the presets menu, choose the preset you want to delete, and then tap this little trash can icon, and then hit delete to confirm. Now we've only got C2 and C3. If you want to update an existing preset, the first thing you need to do is actually switch over to that preset. So tap on the lower left and choose the preset you want to update. Let's go and update our cinematic preset. And we're just going to make a quick change here. Let's just change this to 4K 60 just to show you what's happening. Once you've updated the settings, come back to the preset menu, choose the preset that you want to update or overwrite. In this case, it's C2. Tap on that, and then you'll get a warning telling you whether you want to overwrite C2 with the current settings. Tap confirm if you do. And now if we switch to C3, we're back in vertical mode. And if we switch back to our cinematic C2, down here it's updated, and now we're in 4K 60 for that preset. Just switch back to vertical mode so I can show you this. For this bonus tip, what you can do is set up the Osmo Pocket 3 to automatically start recording as soon as you flip that screen and turn the camera on. But more than that, you can select a custom preset mode that you've created to film in. To set this up, swipe down from the top, and then you want to tap this little icon here, the second in from the top left. Tap that toggle to turn on screen rotate and capture, and then you can choose the mode that you want to record in. So you can select all of these preset modes like video or low light, but if you scroll up, you can set your custom modes too. So what we're going to do is we're going to select C2, we get a little green arrow there, and then tap at the top left to go back and swipe up. I'm going to turn off the Osmo Pocket 3 now and just close the screen. Now watch what happens when I rotate this screen to turn the Pocket 3 on. It's automatically going to switch to C2, custom mode 2 that we set up, and it's automatically started recording straight away. So that's a really quick and easy way to get straight into filming. So what are the limitations to these custom presets? There's a few things that these presets don't let you set. I swipe down from the top, for example, these gimbal rotational speeds, they're not saved in custom presets, and also these gimbal modes are also not saved in custom presets. So if you change these a lot, you're going to want to make sure that they're set correctly, even if you're using custom preset. Hey there, I've made almost 500 YouTube videos now, and there's one thing that I've always kind of struggled with that I've recently realized that Osmo Pocket 3 is actually amazing for. Hi, I'm Jason, and this channel is all about making better looking, sounding and edited video. If that's something that you're into, please subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. So I've used the Osmo Pocket 3 for about 7 months now, and in this video I'm going to share with you 5 reasons why the Pocket 3 is the perfect camera for you to take your videos to the next level by using it as a top-down camera. If you're doing any kind of video where you're using your hands or showing something, a top-down angle makes filming so much easier and quicker. Having a top-down shot is great for unboxings, gear tutorials, art videos, cooking videos, you name it. The first reason the Osmo Pocket 3 is a great top-down camera is because it's so small and light. What this means is that it's super easy to mount overhead without needing any heavy-duty stands or rigging. So I'm using a C-stand here because that's just what I have, but it's way overkill for this camera. The Osmo Pocket 3 grip extender and also the battery extender have these mounting points, which also makes it super easy to mount this thing overhead. What I'm doing is using this pin that's screwed into the Pocket 3 and then just attached to a grip head. You could even use this thing with a selfie stick, a clamp and a light stand. Just make sure it's 100% safe and it won't fall. The nice thing about using a C-stand arm is that it's metal, so I can clip this little magnetic aperture light to it just to give a little tiny bit of extra fill from the top down. I'll link to this light in the description. Reason 2 is that this camera has a nice wide angle lens fitted to it. It's about 20mm full frame equivalent. So what this means is that it's great if you're working with larger items that you want to show off in a top down view like this. And it also means that you don't have to have this camera really high up to get that wide angle view. In fact, it's just out of frame, just about there. And this leads us on to reason 3. The Osmo Pocket 3 has 3 different focus modes. You've got continuous video autofocus, you've got single shot autofocus, and you've also got something called product showcase mode. You can use single shot autofocus if you just want to fix the focus on the table or maybe on the object and not have it changed while you're filming. And product showcase mode is great because it will quickly focus on whatever you hold up closest to the camera. That means you can hold something up and get really quick, snappy autofocus on it. The camera also has a really close minimum focus distance of 20 centimeters or 7.9 inches in freedom units. And what this means is that you can hold up smaller things closer to the camera to really show off some of the details. Reason 4 is huge, and that's that you can use the DJI Mimo app on your phone to wirelessly connect to the camera. What that means is, we're going to get a little bit Inception like here, is that you can use your phone as a top-down monitor to check your focus and your framing, or check or change your exposure, and even fine-tune your top-down angle using the on-screen joysticks to move the gimbal around just to get things looking how you want, and even use the app to start and stop recording. All this without having to physically touch the camera, which could cause it to shake, or it might slightly change the top-down angle so it doesn't quite line up how you want. Before we get to reason 5, you can learn loads of ways to make better videos by checking out the first link in this video's description and getting my 52 Laws of Video ebook, and at the same time help support this channel. Alright, reason 5 is that there's 3 different ways that you can get the video files that you've recorded from your Osmo Pocket 3 to your editing computer. First, you can just simply eject the micro SD card from the rig and take it to your computer to transfer the footage. Second, you can just unclip the rest of the Pocket 3 from the extender grip or the battery grip and then take the whole unit over to your computer, and then it's really quick and simple to click it back onto your overhead rig. By the way, if you're thinking about getting an Osmo Pocket 3, I would highly recommend you go for the combo that includes both this extension grip, which has the mounting point, and it also includes the battery grip, which has extra battery power in it, which means you can record for longer. The battery grip also has a mounting point. These extra things are just going to make the camera so much easier to work with, especially if you want to use it with an overhead rig. I'll put a link to the combo in the video description. And the third way to transfer your files would be to have a permanent USB-C cable up on the rig attached to the camera, and then when you want to transfer the footage, you can just simply plug the other end of the USB-C cable into your computer or laptop and then transfer the files over that cable. All of these transfer options make it really easy to have a permanent overhead rig set up to save you time when you're filming. Hey there, so there's 12 mistakes that you can easily avoid if you want to make better looking Pocket 3 videos. The first mistake is to not change the joystick speed in the settings when you're filming and you're using the joystick to move the gimbal. So this is what it looks like with the joystick speed set to 7, which is the maximum. Gimbal moves really quickly and it really doesn't look good. You're going to want to change that joystick speed to the minimum value, which is 1. You can see it's a lot smoother now and looks a lot more movie-like. Mistake 2 is to expect your gimbal to do too much work for you when you're doing walking shots. So this is me just walking normally and I'm not really paying too much attention to the gimbal. I'm just kind of plodding along as I would ordinarily walk. You can see from that everything's moving up and down. So when you're doing walking shots, you want to be a bit more intentional and you want to walk from heel to toe, and that's going to try and cut down on some of that gimbal movement. Also, don't walk barefoot on spiky rocks. Mistake 3 is to not use tilt lock mode for the gimbal when you're doing panning shots. So I've got the gimbal set to tilt lock mode, and you can see as I do this pan, the horizon stays nice and centered. But if I set the gimbal to follow mode, you can see that if I accidentally move the gimbal up and down while I'm panning, the horizon moves as well. So you're going to end up with not quite as smooth a pan. Mistake 4 is to not use the wide angle adapter if you have it. This is what a shot looks like without the wide angle adapter, and this is what it looks like with the wide angle adapter. You can also use the wide angle adapter while you're vlogging like this, just to give you a bit more space in the frame around you and show off what's in the background a bit more. But more than that, using the wide angle adapter will change up how your shots feel, so they don't all kind of feel a bit the same. Related to number 4, mistake 5 is to not mix up your shot sizes when you're filming with your Pocket 3. You don't just want big wide shots like this all the time, or vlogging shots like this all the time. You want to mix it up, and that means getting close-ups of things in the scene. Using your Pocket 3 on a tripod like this so you can get a bit further away from it. It helps if you've got the wireless mic for this. You're really just trying to bring your Pocket 3 videos to life a bit more. Mistake 5.5 is to not subscribe to this channel if you want more Pocket 3 tips. Mistake 6 is leaving your Pocket 3 in continuous focus mode like this when you're doing a reveal shot, because in a second it's going to do an autofocus bump to the background. Instead, what you want to do is switch to Pro mode and then change to single focus mode, tap in the background to focus on that, and then reposition the gimbal and then do your reveal. That way the background's already in focus. Mistake 7 is to not click the battery handle or extension grip in properly. You need to hear 2 clicks to make sure it's firmly in place, otherwise it could accidentally fall off and you could lose your Pocket 3. Mistake number 8 is to not set the appropriate gimbal speed when you're filming. Currently it's set to slow, and as I'm moving around, you can see that there's a bit of a lag as the gimbal's trying to catch up with me, but it probably feels fairly smooth and fairly nice. And this is what it looks like with that gimbal rotational speed set to fast. You can see it's kind of keeping up with me a bit more. The gimbal's moving quicker, but it feels a bit less smooth and a bit less movie-like. But sometimes that's what you need if you're moving quickly. Mistake 9, if you're not using the wireless mic 2 and you're using the internal microphones on the Pocket 3, is to not set the directional audio depending on how and where you're filming. This is what it sounds like with the microphone direction set to all around when you're using the internal mics. And this is what it sounds like with the internal mic direction set to front only. And this is what it sounds like with the mic direction set to front and back. Mistake 10 is if you're using the DJI Mic 2 transmitter with your Pocket 3, is not to correctly set the volume when you first get it. It comes as a pretty good default out of the box, but you want to fine tune it to the loudness and the sound of your voice. Mistake 11 is to not reframe your shot when you're using ActiveTrack. So ActiveTrack's turned off at the minute. I'm going to double tap the screen, and now we've got ActiveTrack enabled. And by default, it's just going to try and keep me in the center of the frame here. But what you can actually do once you've enabled ActiveTrack is you can use the 5D joystick and you can reframe where you want yourself in the ActiveTrack picture. Now, if I walk around, it's actually going to keep me to that side of the frame, even though it's still tracking me as I'm walking around. Mistake number 12 is to not set up custom preset shooting modes to make it super quick and easy to use your Pocket 3. The Osmo Pocket 3 really is like having a camera crew that fits in your pocket. The problem is, when you're filming yourself alone, you're going to face some challenges. You're going to be wearing lots of different hats: actor, sound person, director, camera operator, and cinematographer. That's why in this video I'm going to give you the ultimate guide to filming yourself alone with your Pocket 3. If you want to make the whole process more fun, easier, less stressful, and get a better video at the end of it, make sure you watch all of the tips in this video. The first tip I've got for you when you're filming yourself applies even if you're not filming with a Pocket 3, and that's to have some kind of plan. Even if this is just a basic idea in your head. It could also be something as complicated as an entire script and all of the shots that you want to get. And even if you're just vlogging your daily routine or something like that, at least have an idea in your head of the video that you want to create at the end. The reason for that is it's important because you're going to be doing all of these different jobs. You will forget something, and you'll forget to get a shot, or you'll get the wrong shot, or something will be out of focus. Having a plan is going to make your life so much easier, and it's going to mean you don't miss out on important shots. And you can use whatever works for you. You can use bullet points, You can use a to-do list or a task list on your phone. You can print something out on paper, whatever you need to do that suits your workflow. All right, the next tip I've got for you is to not always use continuous autofocus mode. If I just spin you around, there's a big old windmill up there, and I've got continuous autofocus on in the minute. It's kind of focusing up here, so if I slide across and reveal, at some point it's going to try and focus on that windmill, and sometimes you're going to get like a focus bump or a focus jump, and that's not really what you want. It's going to look a bit rubbish. So instead, I'm going to switch back around to the front, and I'm going to change to single shot focus mode. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to tap to focus on that windmill, and then it's going to keep that focus distance. So now when I do the slide, nothing's in focus here, and as I slide out to the left, that windmill is already pre-focused. You can use single shot focus for other things. So for example, you can pre-focus on a point, and then as you walk closer to it, you're going to gradually get into focus. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm just going to balance the Pocket 3 on the floor, and I'm going to tap right at the bottom of the screen here to pre-focus on that point. I'm going to go all the way to the end here, and then as I'm getting closer and closer to the camera, I should slowly start to come into focus as I get closer to the camera. Just provides a nice little effect. When it comes to filming yourself effectively, you might want to consider getting a couple of bits of extra gear for your Pocket 3. If you're concerned about getting cinematic or movie-like motion blur in your videos, you might want to get yourself some variable ND filters or fixed ND filters. This is going to help you control the shutter speed, and it's going to help you get that natural motion blur. And even more than ND filters, I would highly recommend you get a decent tripod for filming yourself. It's just going to make your life so much easier. It's going to give you more flexibility on where you put your Pocket 3. It's going to give you more choice of camera angles and locations, and it's going to mean that your Pocket 3 stays safe as long as you get a decent tripod, and you can walk away from it using ActiveTrack, and it's going to look great. I've been using this lightweight carbon fiber tripod for years now. It's absolutely fantastic. I'll put a link to it in the description. And there's a couple of items of what I would say is optional gear, but they're really going to give you the ability to have more creative control over when you're filming yourself. The first of which would be some kind of slider that you could put the Pocket 3 on, and the second would be some kind of portable lighting. This is a little aperture light. I'll put a link to this in the description as well. So if you're filming in like darker conditions, you can just turn the light on, and it's going to mean that you can use a lower ISO and get less noise in your image. This particular light is pretty cool because you can also change the color temperature. So if you want a warmer looking light, you can do that, and you can even change it to HSI mode. The next thing you want to think about is to get a variety of different shots or different shot sizes. So I'll show you what I mean. I'll start off by getting a wide shot of where I am and where the car is. I will just set the camera down here, and I'll show you what it looks like at the end. Gonna just record the car driving into this spot. So that's going to be the wide shot, and then we're going to get a bit closer to the car. Just going to set the shot up down here. So this is going to be the medium shot of me walking around opening the door. And then we're going to come to a close-up of me opening the door and reaching in. To do that, I'm going to put the camera on the driver's side there. Open the door again. And then we can go even closer. Just come back around the other side. And what we're going to do now is going to get close-up of this bag opening, and so we can see what's inside. Then maybe grabbing the camera out. And then to finish off that little sequence, we'll just turn the camera around again, get a shot of me walking away. And this is what that sequence looks like when it's all edited together. Notice how we're changing up all of the different shot sizes to keep things interesting. The next tip I've got for you when you're filming yourself is to give yourself time. Filming yourself alone takes so much more time than you ever think it will take. You have to set up the shots, you have to review the shots, you have to make sure that your exposure is correct, you have to make sure your focus is correct, you have to make sure your composition looks good. All this takes a lot more time than you ever think it will, so just be aware of your limitations in terms of time and try and plan accordingly. And also, don't get too stressed about things. A bit of planning will also help with this. All right, let's talk about movement. One of the big selling points of the Osmo Pocket 3 is the fact that it's got a gimbal which is stabilizing the whole camera. The Osmo Pocket 3 is made to be moved. So obviously you can do vlogging selfie shots like this. If you switch the camera around to the front, you can get point of view walking shots. But there's so much more you can do when it comes to movement with the Pocket 3. So obviously you can just hold it out at hand's length, but I've got it on a tripod at the minute, which means I can extend the tripod legs and then, using some ActiveTrack technology, hold the Pocket 3 right out in front of me and get this kind of snorri cam effect. That windmill's making some weird noises. Another useful thing you can do if you've got your Pocket 3 on a tripod is to swing it down and get shots of your feet walking. So I'm just holding the Pocket 3 underslung mode on the end of a tripod. Again, this is kind of mixing up shots as well. Movement can also come when you've got the Pocket 3 stationary, but double tap on your face to enable ActiveTrack, and then it's going to track you as you walk through the scene. If you want to go even further, you could attach the Osmo Pocket 3 to a slider and then use ActiveTrack in conjunction with a slider to get even more interesting looking shots. You could even use a suction mount inside your car to film yourself while you're driving. Just remember to stay safe and obviously don't break any laws. By the way, if you're not already subscribed, please do that. I'd really appreciate it. All right, on to the next tip. The next thing that's super important, and quite honestly I forget this all the time, is to do then review. Because you don't have a camera operator recording what's happening, you don't actually know if the take was good or if you're in focus, or maybe you stumbled a word and you didn't realize it. So it's really important, after you film every shot, just review it on the inbuilt screen on the Pocket 3. It's going to save you tons of time later, and it's going to mean that you don't miss out on an important shot. Also, I'd recommend that you actually review it on the screen before you move the Pocket 3 or your tripod, just so you don't have to try and recreate the perfect composition which you just got. The next tip I've got for you is to make use of all of the amazing audio features you've got on the Pocket 3. I recommend you get the combo kit when you buy your Pocket 3 that also includes the DJI Mic 2, which I'm wearing just underneath my t-shirt here because of wind noise. That's going to give you loads more options. I'll put a link to the creator combo down in the description. The benefit of having this wireless audio is that you can get further and further away from the camera and you're still recording great audio, and it gives you a lot more flexibility when you're filming your shots. You can go as far away as you want because the DJI Mic 2 also features internal backup recording, so even if you lose the wireless signal from the transmitter to the Pocket 3, you're still going to have a backup copy of the audio internally on this transmitter. And you can even set it to record 32-bit float audio, which is going to really help prevent any overloads if you've got too loud audio that you're recording. But that's not all. You can simultaneously record the audio from the wireless transmission, the internal 32-bit float audio, and the audio that the Pocket 3 internal microphones are picking up. That means if you're far away from the Pocket 3, you can mix in that kind of ambient audio that the internal microphones are picking up to get a really nice soundscape. And while we're talking about audio, getting the right music for your videos is super important, so you can set the mood and really kind of get the audience to feel what you want them to feel. This is not a sponsored video, but I've been using Epidemic Sound for over 4 years now. If you want a free trial, check out the first link in the video description. So having a camera crew in your pocket is all very well and good, but you don't want to have to keep going back to the camera all the time just to tweak how your shot's looking. You really want to use the Osmo Pocket 3 and pretend it's a camera operator. The great thing is you can use a DJI Mimo app to do that. This is what it looks like on screen at the minute. There's loads of stuff you can do here. So the biggest thing is that you can change the framing of your shot without needing to keep go to the camera and back again and waste your time. It's going to save you a lot of messing around. You can also turn on some really useful features. If you hit the 3 dots at the bottom and then toggle this overexposure alert, it's going to turn on these zebras, which is going to show you things that are potentially overexposed. And if you tap the 3 dots at the bottom left, you can also turn on this histogram to get a better idea of your exposure too. You can even do things like start ActiveTrack. So I'm just going to drag a box around me. ActiveTrack's going to start. Now I can move around the scene and still use these on-screen joysticks to reposition where the ActiveTrack is going to frame me. The next tip I've got for you is just because you've got a gimbal doesn't mean you can't add effects in post-production. So for example, on a tripod shot like this, you could add some fake camera movement or fake camera wobble just to simulate that a real camera person was hand-holding a camera. You could digitally crop in just to simulate having a longer telephoto lens. You could add keyframes to create a digital zoom in or out. You could even get that widescreen effect by adding black bars or changing the aspect ratio. And you've even got the 2:3:5:1 aspect ratio guides built into the Pocket 3 if you want to make sure your widescreen compositions look good. When it comes to post-production, you might also want to invest a bit of time learning some basic color grading. For example, how to color grade HLG footage from your Pocket 3. Got an entire video dedicated to that, which I'll put a link to down in the description. Hi there, so you got yourself some variable ND filters for your Osmo Pocket 3, and now you want to get the best out of them. We're going to be using these variable ND filters from Freewell in this video. Links to these are in the description, and this is not a sponsored video, but you could be using variable ND filters from other brands and still use this same technique I'm about to show you. I'm just going to go and get this crazy tripod setup ready so I can record the screen on the Pocket 3. While you can use variable ND filters in full auto mode, if you really want to make your video shine, you're going to need to switch to Pro mode. So I'm just going to swipe from the right, and then I'm going to tap Pro to switch to Pro mode, and then I'm going to tap on exposure. What you want to do is use this dial on the left hand side to select a shutter speed, and you're going to want to use these shutter speeds that I'm going to show you on screen right now, depending on the frame rate you're using. And as a rule of thumb, try and set a shutter speed that's roughly double your frame rate. So we chose a frame rate of 24p, so our frame rate is going to be 1/48. The closest we can get on the Pocket 3 is 1/50th here. Next, you're going to want to choose an ISO, so you can select a fixed ISO. This ranges from 50 all the way up to 3200. So in this case, let's go and select an ISO of 50. At the top left here, you can see this EV value. This is currently plus 1.7. If you see a positive value here, this means that you're going to be overexposed and the image is going to be too bright. If you see a negative value here, it means that the image is probably going to be too dark and underexposed. Once you're happy with your settings, tap confirm to save them. I'm also going to change this to standard color mode. As you can see on the Pocket 3 screen here, everything's completely overblown and overexposed. And if you look at this value here, hopefully you can see that it's currently reading plus 1.7. Just put my hand in front of the Pocket 3. You can see this value changing, and this is what the Pocket 3 currently thinks the exposure is. It's telling us that it's overexposed essentially, and we need to add some ND filters to reduce that brightness. So I'm going to start off by adding the 1 to 5 stop filter onto the front of the lens. The really nice thing about these is that they're magnetized, so they just click straight onto the front of the Pocket 3. So the EV value is still plus 1.7, which means we're overexposed. I'm going to go and rotate the front of the ND filter to change it from 1 stop to 2 stops of ND or light reduction. We're still overexposed, so now I'm going to go and change it to 3 stops just by rotating the front of the ND filter. Still overexposed, and you can just keep doing this 1 stop at a time until the exposure is correct. Now we've reduced it from plus 1.7 to plus 1.3, so we're going in the right direction. Still a bit overexposed though, and we'll go and max out this first ND filter at 5 stops of ND light reduction, and we've managed to reduce this EV value from plus 1.7 down to plus 1 now. If I just turn you around, we've at least reduced that exposure enough to record my face without it being completely overexposed, even though my eyes are a bit overexposed squinting into this sunlight. So in this case, we might want to go and swap out the variable ND filter for the second range, which is even stronger. So we're going to take off this 1 to 5 stop filter. And as soon as we do that, see everything goes almost white, and we'll put on the 6 to 9 stop filter. So this is what it looks like with 6 stops of light reduction with the ND filter. We're at plus 0.7 EV now. You might decide this is what you want, but if you want to get closer to that 0.0 EV, you can dial in some additional light reduction. This is what it looks like with 7 stops of noise reduction. EV is currently plus 0.3, and you can keep turning this. This is with 8 stops until you get the exposure that you want. The meter reading now is negative 0.3 EV. These filters do have hard stops, so you can't go outside of the range on the individual filters, but they don't have clicks for the individual stops, so you can go between different stops. And this is what it looks like with a EV value of 0.0. So this is quote unquote perfect exposure, at least according to the Pocket 3. We're not going to get both the land and the sky perfectly exposed in this particular shot, just because the sun's so bright and we don't have enough dynamic range in the Pocket 3 to capture it all. But you might decide that this is the exposure that you want, 0.0, or you might decide to stop down even more. By stop down, I mean add even more ND. So we'll go to the maximum. This is 9 stops to really try and stop that sun from blowing out. In this particular scene, it becomes a creative choice, but at least now we know that that shutter speed is recording at 1/50th of a second, so we're getting that natural, movie-like, cinematic motion blur. Hey there, there's a lot of settings on the Osmo Pocket 3. Some of them are not very obvious and kind of hidden away. We're going to go deep in this video, so grab yourself a drink and settle in. I suggest you watch all the way to the end so you know exactly what the Osmo Pocket 3 is capable of, so you don't miss out on any features that you might not know even exist, and also so you know exactly where to go when you need to solve a specific problem. If this is the first time we're meeting, hi, I'm Jason. This channel's all about making better looking, better sounding and better edited video. If that's interesting to you, please subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. All right, let's get into the settings. Let's start off with an overview of the main user interface. At the top here, this symbol tells you whether you're recording in portrait or landscape video mode. We're currently in landscape mode. I'll show you how to change that in just a second. Next up, we've got this battery indicator, and if you tap on this, you get more information. You can see we've got 100% in the Pocket 3 itself and 86% in the battery handle. This section tells you whether you're currently in digital zoom or gimbal up and down mode. You can tap on this to change between the two. If you see this version with the plus and minus signs with a value in the middle, this means you can touch and drag this symbol up and down to change the zoom in and zoom out. This is a digital zoom in. Also, when you see this symbols, the 5D joystick up and down movement actually moves the gimbal up and down. If we tap it and now touch and drag this up and down, we're now moving the gimbal up and down rather than zooming in and out. Also now the 5D joystick, if I move that up, this time the 5D joystick operates the digital zoom instead of moving the gimbal. This symbol on the bottom right allows you to quickly change the gimbal, so if I just tap this, it's going to switch to selfie mode, hello. If I tap it again, it's going to switch to forward-facing mode. You can also triple tap the 5D joystick to do the same thing. At the bottom of the screen, it's showing us the current video recording resolution and frame rate, 1080p 24 frames a second. I'll show you how to change that in just a second. This symbol at the bottom left shows you your current filming mode, and you can also tap this to change the filming modes. If you scroll across to the left, you'll find any custom modes that you've set up. I'll show you how to set up custom modes in just a second. So you can choose panorama, photo, video, low light, slow motion, and some of the hyperlapse modes. Just change it back to video for now. We'll look at each of these modes in more detail later in the video. At the top left here, it's telling us the current recording time left on the SD card, and this will change depending on the resolution and frame rate. This symbol allows you to change to one of the smart gimbal modes, so if I tap on this, we've got face auto detect, dynamic framing, and spin shot. If I just come back to face auto detect and tap start, you can see the symbol's changed now, and if I hit record, you can see we get this detecting text, and this box in the middle will automatically lock onto the first face it finds. So if I just triple tap the gimbal a couple of times, so as soon as it sees a face, you can see it's detecting it, and it automatically enables tracking of that face. You can see that we're still in face auto detect mode because this symbol is yellow and we've got this box. To disable it, once again tap on the left and then tap exit to turn off face auto detect. Let's take a look at the next smart gimbal mode, and that's dynamic framing. Dynamic framing allows you to select one of a number of different focus points. I'll just click start, and you can use the 5D joystick now to switch between all of these preset points. Now if I press in the 5D joystick, it's going to lock onto that point. You can see ActiveTrack's been enabled, and now if that light were to move around, it would be tracked. To turn it off, tap on the smart gimbal mode icon and then tap exit. The third of the smart gimbal modes is this spin shot mode, and this rotates the camera around as you're recording to create a kind of spinny, trippy move. You can choose between 90-degree spin shot mode, and if I just tap this left icon, you can see we get that spinning mode. If I tap this, it will spin all the way back to the other side. And you can change this to 180 mode, which will spin around a bigger rotational circle. And if you tap it again, it'll go back the other way. And to exit that, tap on it and choose exit. If you swipe up from the bottom, this is going to give you access to changing of resolutions and frame rates. It's also going to let you change the aspect ratio. So the options that you see here will depend in what mode you're in. We'll look at all the different modes in just a second. Because we're in video shooting mode, we get access to frame rates 24, 25, 30, 48, 50 and 60 in all of these three resolutions. And if you tap at the top right here, you get to change the aspect ratio between 16:9 or 1:1 square. When you're in a 1:1 aspect ratio, you don't get 4K, you only get 3K. But you still get access to all of these frame rates. This is going to change back to 16:9. In portrait mode, you'll get to choose an aspect ratio of 9:16 or 1:1 square. Let's take a look at the different filming modes. You can get access to those by tapping on the bottom left, and annoyingly this screen vanishes really quickly, so I hope they fix that in a future firmware update. Tap it and then scroll left and right to choose your filming modes. And you can see on the left here we've got these custom modes. Let's take a look at pano mode or panorama mode. This is a photo mode, and it will allow you to take panoramic photos. If you swipe up from the bottom, you get these choices. You can do a 3x3 pano or a 180-degree pano, and you can set a countdown for how quickly you want this to start. Let's change this to normal photo mode now. This allows you to take normal photos, and if you swipe up from the bottom, you can choose whether you want the photo to be 16:9 or 1:1 aspect ratio, and you've got these countdown options. Tap it again and then swipe across and we'll go into video mode. This is the mode you'll probably use most of the time, and we just saw the different resolutions that we can get access to in video mode. Next up, let's go and switch to low light mode. This mode uses intelligent auto exposure to try and get the best image in low light conditions. Just be aware that ActiveTrack's not supported in this mode, and if we swipe up from the bottom, we only get 24, 25 and 30 frames a second resolution, and we can only choose between 1080 and 4K. The next mode we're going to look at is this slow motion mode. Notice for all these different modes, the icon on the bottom left changes, so you always know what mode you're shooting in. If you swipe up from the bottom, you can change which slow motion mode you want to use. So we've got resolutions 1080, 2.7 and 4K in landscape mode here. If you want to shoot at 240 frames a second, you have to switch to 1080p to get access to that. And in 4K, you can choose between 100 frames a second and 120 frames a second. Just be aware that these modes bake in the slow motion effect to the video file that's recorded on the SD card. That means you don't have to slow it down in video editing software. You should also be aware that when you're shooting in slow motion mode that you don't get any audio in the video file. You do, however, get a separate audio file recorded to the SD card. Let's take a look at the next mode, and these modes are all of the different lapse modes. Once again, the icon at the bottom left changes, and if we swipe up from the bottom, we can choose the type of lapse mode that we want. Scroll all the way to the left, the first choice is for hyperlapses. All of these lapse modes allow you to essentially compress the passage of time in the video and turn long events into short videos. You're going to want to use the hyperlapse mode when the camera is moving, for example if it's in a car or you're walking with it, and we can choose between how fast we want to speed up time essentially with these rate multipliers. You'll have to experiment depending on the exact situation that you're working with for the effect you want. And if you tap at the top right here, you get to choose the resolution, and you can see here that there's different limitations. We only get to choose between 25 and 30 frames a second. Just tap to go back. If I scroll across, we can get over to time-lapse mode. You want to use this mode when the Pocket 3 is not moving. For example, getting a time-lapse of a sunset or a cityscape. There's a number of different presets here: crowds, clouds, sunset. All of these are going to set preset timings up for you, but you can also scroll across and tap on custom, and now you can swipe up to set those custom parameters. The interval sets how long you're going to wait before each frame or each photo of the time lapse is going to be captured, and here we can set the total duration of filming time. So if you set a total duration of filming time in real time in the real world of 1 hour with a 2-second interval, you're going to end up with a video that's 1 minute and 12 seconds long, and if you increase the interval, you're only shooting a frame every 5 seconds now, so the total video duration that gets recorded is reduced to 28 seconds. The third option is Motionlapse. This is a bit like the time-lapse mode, except this time the gimbal is actually going to move around while it's taking photos that get merged into the finished time-lapse. Tapping on the top right gives you access to the frame rates and resolutions. Notice that this is still limited to 25 and 30 in this mode. Tap the top left to go back. You can choose whether you want the gimbal to move from the left to the right to the left, or in custom motion. Choose left to right and swipe up from the bottom. You get access to the same kind of parameters, the interval and duration. Just tap that to go back. Right to left gives you those same parameters, it's just going to move in a different direction. And in custom mode here, you get to choose a number of waypoints. If I swipe up to set the parameters, once we exit that screen, it's going to tell us to rotate the gimbal and then tap plus to set a waypoint. Now you can move this gimbal to where you want the motion lapse to start and tap the little plus icon in the middle, and at the top this goes to blue, and then you can set a second waypoint. Tap the plus icon, now it turns to a blue tick. And if I tap play on the right here, we get a preview of what the motion is going to look like. And then if I tap record, it's going to tell us that we're going to record soon. And now the motion lapse starts recording and the gimbal will start moving through each of those 2 waypoints. Just going to stop that. And we'll just switch back to video mode. Let's take a look next at the control menu, which you can access by swiping down from the top. And we'll go and tap this icon at the top left to have a look at this first option. And this allows you to save custom shooting modes. So at the minute we've got C1, C2 and C3 set up, and it tells you the settings here. If you want to add a new custom preset, scroll over to where you see the plus and tap plus. This will add a new custom preset, C4, tap confirm, and it will set a preset shooting mode for whatever video settings you've got set up. Tap on the bottom left. Now you can see if I scroll across to the left and right, we've now got this new C4. Let's come back to the control menu. The second icon along is this rotate screen and capture. It's going to automatically start recording as soon as you rotate the screen to power on the Pocket 3. When you've got this enabled, you can choose what video mode you want to automatically start recording in. You can choose the last settings you had. You can choose video mode, low light, hyperlapse. If you always want to use the last settings, click this, but I suggest that you probably want to use one of a known set of modes to automatically record in, just in case you've switched the last mode that you used to something weird. So in this case, let's choose C1 video, because that's a known custom video mode. And you can see now that that icon turns yellow. If I just power off the gimbal, close the screen, now when I rotate the screen, the gimbal is going to turn on and you should see the automatic recording starting, which you do. If you're wondering why I keep putting it back up here, it's just so you can see everything on screen clearly. I'm just going to turn that off, so I'll swipe down from the top and tap this icon and then turn this mode off. It's handy sometimes if you're doing quick run and gun vlogs, but it can be annoying. Tap back to get back to the control menu. Next up, we've got this brightness icon. This allows you to set the brightness of the screen. I normally just leave this set to 100%. And by the way, the screen has been fine for me, even filming in bright sunshine here in Australia in the middle of the day. Next up on the top right, we've got this icon, and if I tap this, you can see it's turned on FT selfie mode. FT stands for face track, and this will automatically recognize and follow your face to ensure the best selfie or vlogging angle. I'll just swipe back up to get back to the main screen, and I'll just scroll back to me, and you should see tracking automatically start as soon as it detected my face, which you do. If I move around now, it's going to try and keep the best angle for that selfie shot. To cancel it, just press the 5D joystick and it will cancel that tracking mode. To turn it off, swipe down and then tap it once again to turn face track selfie mode off. At the bottom right, we can select one of the gimbal follow modes. You can choose between follow, tilt locked and FPV. Follow mode is a general purpose mode, and you can use this for vlogging or for selfies, and it follows the tilting so you can look up and down, and it also follows the panning, so if you move left and right, the gimbal will move left and right. It's still going to keep things upright, but it does differ in one main way to this tilt lock mode. Tilt lock mode is best if you're doing pans left and right, or if you're moving towards or away from a subject. Basically, it locks the tilt axis on the gimbal, so it will keep the horizon in the same place even if you move the Pocket 3 up and down. It still follows panning left and right, just doesn't allow you to look up and down. But you can, however, use the joystick to reposition the horizon before you start the pan. The third option is this FPV mode, and it just gives you that FPV drone look. In this mode, it follows the pan and the tilt, and unlike the other two modes, it also follows the roll. So you can use this for creative effects if you want to become a human FPV drone. Just going to switch this back to tilt lock, tap the top left to go back to the control menu. Next up, we've got this gimbal rotational speed. You can choose between slow, default, and fast. If you set this to slow mode, the gimbal's going to move a lot more smoother and slower, and it's going to give you a more movie-like or a more cinematic experience, if you don't mind me using that word. Default rotational speed is kind of the medium speed, and you can use this for general purposes such as vlogging, and you've also got fast speed. You might want to use this if you're tracking fast-moving subjects, or if you want to create an energetic or a hectic look and feel to your video. Just going to set it back to default. Tap the top left to go back to the control menu. I hope this video so far is providing a ton of value on how to set up your Pocket 3. If it is, please subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. Alright, back to the settings. Next up, this button allows you to switch between landscape and portrait mode, so I'm just going to tap it. The icon in the control menu changes to this portrait icon, and if I just swipe up to close the control menu, this icon's now changed to show portrait mode. Tap it again to set auto rotation, or tap it again to choose landscape. If you set this mode to auto rotation, the recording mode is going to depend on how this physical screen is rotated. It's going to swipe up to close the control menu, and if I rotate the screen now, we're now recording in portrait or vertical video mode, and if I rotate the screen, we're now recording in landscape. Personally, I like to set this to a specific value so I always know what I'm recording in. The last button in this control menu allows you to access these settings. So if I tap on the bottom left, we get access to loads of different settings. So we'll go through these one by one. First off is this wireless mic setting. If we tap on this, we'll get a number of different options. If you're not using the DJI Mic 2 wireless mic connected to the Pocket 3, these are not going to be changeable, and they'll all be grayed out, as you can see here. We'll cover internal microphone settings later in this video, but if I just turn on my DJI Mic 2, it connects to the Pocket 3 automatically, and if I just tap this to get rid of it, now this icon is enabled. It's showing us the battery life and the current internal recording capacity of the built-in internal recording on the transmitter, and as I'm talking, you can see this bar moving up and down, which is monitoring the audio volume. If you need to pair a DJI Mic 2, you can tap on this icon and then go through the procedure to pair the microphone with the Pocket 3. I'm not going to do that here. Once you've connected a DJI Mic 2, you can scroll down and access all of these other settings. The first of which is this monitor volume. You can change that. This affects the headphone volume if you've got a USB to headphone adapter attached to the Pocket 3. And if we scroll down, we can access some transmitter settings. The first of which is this LED setting. If I tap that, it's going to turn off all of the LEDs on the DJI Mic 2 and tap to turn it back on. You can also choose whether you want the vibration on or off in the DJI Mic 2 transmitter. For example, you might want to turn this off if it annoys you or the subject. Otherwise, I recommend leaving it on, as it's a kind of a safety check in case you accidentally stop recording. The next option is this audio to video sync. If you've got this turned on, it's going to automatically start internal recording on the DJI Mic 2, as long as it's connected, of course. So you're always going to have that backup internal recording on the transmitter itself. This is, however, a terrible name for this setting. Next up, we've got the low cut option. If this is turned on, the transmitter is going to automatically filter out low frequencies below 150 Hz. And it's going to try and make the recordings clearer because it's filtering out those lower frequency sounds such as rumbles. Just be aware that this might affect the sound of your voice. So I usually have this turned off because it's better to do this in your video editing software with an EQ plugin because you've got more control. The next option is to enable or disable 32-bit float recording. This applies only to the internal recordings on the DJI Mic 2 transmitter. This means that the audio files that get recorded internally will be 32-bit float. This will give you a larger audio dynamic range, which means a lower likelihood of the audio clipping if you talk too loudly. Just be aware that you can still overload or distort the audio if the microphone itself is overloaded, if you're really loud and you talk really close to it. The next option is to format the transmitter, and if I tap on this, it's going to give us the option to cancel or confirm. That will erase all of the audio files on the transmitter. We can't format transmitter 2 because we don't have one attached. And finally, we can get access to the current firmware that's installed on the transmitter. Let's go back and exit the wireless mic settings, and next we can set the gimbal startup direction. If you tap on this, you've got 3 options. You can have the gimbal startup facing forwards, backwards, or to the last used settings. Forward mode points away from you and the screen. Backwards mode points towards you if you want to do selfies. I tend not to use last setting, and I always tend to use either forward or backwards because I want the gimbal starting up in a known direction. Tap the top left arrow to go back to the settings menu, and now we'll scroll up and take a look at this rotate screen to power off. If we tap on this, we get a number of different options. We've got 2 seconds, never, or now. This is currently set to 2 seconds, so I'll show you what happens if I just exit the menu and rotate the screen. We get a 2-second countdown before it automatically turns off. Just turn it back on and come back to that menu setting. If you set this to never, then the gimbal will never automatically turn off when you rotate the screen. And if you set it to now, you won't get that 2-second delay to keep the camera on. I tend to keep this to 2 seconds just to give me a chance to cancel it. Next up is this slider control setting. We get to choose what that button on the right hand side of the screen does, gimbal or zoom. And so inversely what the joystick does when you move it up and down. This setting is basically doing exactly the same thing as tapping this icon on the right hand side to change between those 2 modes that we looked at earlier. Right, back into the settings. The next option is to enable or disable this selfie flip option. What this does, it will change the recorded video file, but it doesn't actually affect what you see in the screen while recording. So this can be a bit confusing. It only affects things if the gimbal's pointing backwards at you. So for example, say you're recording a selfie with words on your t-shirt. This mode is turned on, then the words on the t-shirt will be back to front in the video file when you watch it back. But if you turn this mode off, when you watch the video file back, the words will be correct on the t-shirt. Next up, we've got this built-in mic audio backup option, and this is actually a pretty cool feature. You can see it's currently turned on. Basically, you just get to turn this off or on. When it's turned on, it will record audio to a separate audio file on the SD card, but the video still has the audio in it as well. It works whether or not you've got the DJI mic connected, but it does make most sense when you've got DJI mic connected. In case you forgot to turn the mic on, for example, you still have a backup audio file that you can sync with the video on the SD card. And as you can see from this warning at the bottom, it doesn't work in all video modes. So I normally have this turned on because why not? Next up, we've got this OTG connection option. This will allow you to connect to an Android OTG capable phone to view and transfer photos and videos using the Android device's album or file management app. And you can use the USB cable supplied in the box for this. Next up, we've got this wireless connection setting. If I tap that, it's going to give you the wireless info. For example, if you want to connect to the Mimo app. And you can also change the Wi-Fi frequency. It's currently set to 5.8 gigahertz. And if you want to, you can tap this to reset your Wi-Fi connection and password. I'll just tap cancel because I don't want to do that. On the top left to get back to the main settings menu. Next up, we've got this wearable mode, and if we tap that, it's going to ask you to confirm whether or not to enable it. When this is enabled, the gimbal will move and lock into selfie mode, and it also will lock in tilt lock mode. You can use it to get a first person view. So if I just tap confirm to enable it, if you want to get out of this mode, you need to swipe up from the bottom to disable that mode. You can use the optional Osmo Pocket 3 expansion adapter if you want to use this mode. Next up, we've got this gimbal calibration option, and if you tap this, you can start the gimbal calibration process. So calibrating your gimbal can reduce gimbal drift where things move out of alignment a bit. This can be caused by human error or nearby magnetic interference, but if you do tap confirm to start this, don't hold the gimbal during calibration. Make sure it's on a flat, stable surface. Just going to tap cancel because I don't want to do that at the minute. Next up, we've got this joystick speed, and if you tap this, you get to choose two different settings. On the left here, you get to choose how the joystick affects the speed of the digital zoom, and on the right, you get to choose how the joystick affects the speed of the gimbal moving. I'd recommend using the lowest gimbal speed setting here if you're going to be recording videos while using the joystick to do panning movements. Once you've chosen these two settings, tap confirm to save. Next up, we get to choose the video compression mode. You get to choose between efficiency, HEVC, and compatibility, H.264. HEVC mode records the H.265 video codec, which means smaller video files, which means more videos fit on the same size SD card, but it can be harder to edit for some computers. Compatibility mode uses the H.264 video codec, which means larger video files, which means less videos fit on the same size SD card, but it's usually easier to edit, especially on older computers, and it's compatible with more things. I personally use the HEV setting because I've got a powerful enough PC so I can edit them easily, and I get more space on my card. Let's go back to the settings menu. Next up, you get this sounds option, and if we tap this, you can choose the volume of the internal sounds, high, medium, and low. And if I just tap cross to go back to the main screen, you'll hear these sounds, for example, when you hit record and when you stop record, which I find super annoying. So I normally have this set to mute so we don't get any sounds. The next option in the settings menu is for reference lines, and if you tap this, you've got a couple of different options. You can turn on grid mode, and if I just tap cross, now we get the rule of thirds grid. This can help with composition, and if we go back to that option, I'll just turn off grid and turn on 2.35:1 guides. This gives you these lines at the top and bottom, so you can use this if you want to compose your video and edit in a widescreen movie-like format of a 2.35:1 aspect ratio. You can have both grid and this 2.351 turned on at the same time, but it can get a little crowded on the screen. Next up, we've got this anti-flicker settings option, and you've got three options if you tap this. You've got 50 Hz, 60 Hz, and auto. These options can help prevent that flicker caused by things like fluorescent lights or TV screens when you're recording videos. So you should select the frequency here of the region that you're recording in according to the power grid in that region, or you can set this to auto. Try and let the Pocket 3 figure it out for itself. Next up, we've got time code, and if we have a look at this, you can see it's telling us that we can connect a USB adapter to the USB port and sync the time codes from an external time code source. You can also use the built-in time code here, and if you scroll down to the bottom, you can tap reset time code and confirm that, and that will reset the internal time code to 0, or you can use the Pocket 3 system time by tapping this icon here, and now the time code will be set to the date and time on the Pocket 3. Next up, we've got this naming management. If we open this up, you can set independent naming for the folders and files that get saved onto the SD card. So for example, if you have multiple Pocket 3s, you can have each video file with a custom file name postfix. So currently it's set to AA01, but you might want to set this to something like Pocket 01. Then on the other Pocket 3, you can set this to Pocket 02. So you'll always know which Pocket 3 your files came from. And if you want to reset these back to the factory defaults, you can just tap these icons here. One thing to note is that it doesn't change the existing files on the SD card that have already been recorded. Alrighty then, next up, we've got screen off when record. This allows you to turn off the Pocket 3 screen when you're recording video. You can set this to turn off after 3 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or never. I usually have this set to never because I always want to see what I'm recording, but you could set this to turn off to save battery life, for example, or other examples you might want to turn the screen off include long single take walking videos or long time lapses, or if you're doing a long single take interview and you want to preserve battery life. Similarly, we've got this auto power off option. This is currently set to 5 minutes, but you can choose 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, and 30 seconds. This will automatically power off the Pocket 3 as long as you're not recording something after that set amount of time. The next setting allows you to turn off the LED on the Pocket 3. You might want to turn this off if you're filming at night with the screen off and you don't want your night vision to be disturbed, or if it annoys you. The next option is this continue live stream option. Basically, if you're using the Mimo app to do live streaming, you can use this to continue the last live stream with the Mimo app that you were doing. Just tap back because we're not doing that. The next option allows you to set the language. I'm just going to leave that to English. This is the language for the menus. Next up, we've got the format option. You can tap that, and if you want to format the internal SD card, you just swipe this across to format it. I'm not going to do that at the minute. Next up is the factory reset option. If you're having major problems with your Pocket 3, you might want to try and do this, or support might ask you to do this, to reset everything back to the factory defaults just to see if that fixes the problem. The last but one setting is this device info. This just gives you access to the firmware, names and serial numbers of all the different components of your Pocket 3. And you've also got this option at the bottom to export a log to the SD card. DJI support might ask you to do that sometimes. And last up in this menu, we've got compliance info, which just tells you the regulatory information. I'm going to tap this cross at the top right to go back to the main screen. Alright, next up is exposure compensation while you're recording a video. So if you're not recording and you swipe from the right here, you get these options, which we'll look at in a minute. If I just hit record, and then while we're recording, swipe from the right, you get access to this exposure compensation slider. If you tap and hold and slide this down to a negative EV value, the video will get darker, and if you slide this up to a plus EV value, the video will get brighter. This just lets you compensate for what the Pocket 3 thinks it should be recording in terms of exposure. This works in non-pro mode, and it also works in pro mode with auto exposure turned on. We'll get to pro mode in just a second. Also, different modes have different things you're able to change. We'll get to those limitations in just a minute. So we're not currently recording. I'll swipe from the right, and you can see at the top here, this Pro button is not turned on. That means we only get access to a couple of options in non-Pro mode. The first of which are these glamour effects, and if I tap this, it's telling us to connect to the DJI Mimo app to view what these effects look like. You won't actually see the effect on the screen here. And glamour mode lets you make your teeth whiter, give you fake lipstick, change the shape of your face and all that kind of thing. I'm not going to show you that in this video. In non-pro mode, the only other thing we can set is this image adjustment option. I'm just going to rotate the screen so you can see these settings a bit better. So if I tap image adjustment, we can choose the default values for sharpness and noise reduction. But if we tap custom, we can dial in our own custom settings for both noise reduction on the right here and sharpness on the left. The sharpness setting basically sets how crisp your videos will look. You can set this from anywhere from +2 all the way down to -2, and you might want to experiment with something like -1 or -2 if you think your videos look too digital and too sharp. Noise reduction is how much noise is reduced from things like high ISO and dark conditions. You can set this from +1 down to -2. But if you have a lot of noise reduction happening, it can make the video look a bit plasticky or soft. So you should definitely experiment with this to get the look and feel that you like the most. I'm just going to set this to -1 and -1, because remember that you can apply noise reduction and sharpening when you're editing your video in post-production. Tap confirm to save those settings. All right, let's take a look next at Pro mode. To turn on Pro mode, tap the Pro button. It turns yellow to indicate you're now in Pro mode, and you get access to loads more options now. So why might you want to use Pro mode? Basically because it gives you more control. It allows you to set stable exposure or white balance that's not going to change while you're recording your video. You can use it for creative uses. Basically, you're in control, not the Pocket 3. The options that you can choose depend on the shooting mode you're in. This table shows you what you have control of. So for example, in low light mode, you can't change image adjustment parameters, the sharpness and noise reduction. You have video options. If you tap the microphone, you have audio options. We'll have a look at those in just a minute. And in the video options, the first thing you have control over is exposure. So if we tap the exposure icon, we get a couple of different choices, and I'm just going to rotate the screen because I think it's easier to see in landscape. So because the Pocket 3 has a fixed aperture of 2.0, it means that the only way we can control how bright or dark the image is, the exposure, is if we change the shutter speed or the ISO. We can also add ND filters, but that's for another video. You can choose between manual exposure or auto exposure here. I'm going to start off with manual settings. In manual settings, you get to control the shutter speed and the ISO. You can control the shutter speed by scrolling down or up here. This will make the image brighter or darker. Normally, you're going to want to set this shutter speed to be double your frame rate or as close to it as you can get. So for example, if we were shooting in 30 frames a second, we'd want to try and set this to 1/60th of a second. The 60 is double the 30 FPS. You can go all the way up to 1/8000th of a second if you're shooting on a really bright day, but that's probably not going to look too good. And you can go as slow a shutter speed all the way down to 1/25th of a second if it's really dark or you want to try and get some creative effects. We'll just set this back to 160 for the minute. The other thing you can control in manual mode is the ISO. So you can set a specific fixed ISO, so from 50, 100, 200, all the way up to 1600 and eventually 3200 if you're filming in really dark conditions. If you choose one of these fixed values, then the Pocket 3 won't compensate for changes in light. At the top left here, you can see this exposure value. It's at EV -1 at the minute. If I lower the ISO, come on, now it changes to EV -2. A negative number means that it's too dark or underexposed. And if I change this to a higher fixed ISO, now we're at +2.3 EV, and that's telling us that we're now overexposed and the image is probably going to be too bright. The EV value displayed also changes in response to changing the shutter speed. It's the Pocket 3 giving you some indication of whether it thinks that your video will be too bright or too dark. As well as choosing a specific fixed ISO, if you scroll all the way to the top, you can choose one of a number of ISO ranges. When you do this, notice you get a little A symbol at the top here. This will allow the Pocket 3 to change the ISO, but only within the range that you specify. So you can choose a range of 50 to 100, which is quite a small range, 50 to 200, 50 to 400, 50 to 800, 50 to 1600, or 50 to 3200. You're basically limiting the maximum ISO the Pocket 3 will set because a greater ISO usually means more noise in the image. Also notice when you change from a fixed ISO here, watch what happens at the top left when I change to an ISO range. Now we've got this EV value in yellow at the top here. The ISO range is currently set to 50 to 400, but if we change this to 50 to 100, that's going to limit the maximum ISO to 100. Now the EV value changes to -2, indicating that the Pocket 3 can't set a high enough ISO to get a good exposure. But we can, however, tap this yellow EV value at the top here, and now notice that the shutter speed has changed to this EV value. What we can do now is dial in plus or minus EV values to correct whatever the Pocket 3 thinks is the correct ISO. Notice when we're changing these EV values, the shutter speed that we set, 1/60th of a second, has been fixed. So it's not going to change the shutter speed, it's just going to change what the Pocket 3 thinks is the correct exposure. Instead, you can tap the top left again to go back to shutter speed setting. As well as manual exposure mode, you can change to auto exposure mode. This allows you to only select the ISO range, so 50 to 100, 50 to 200, and all the way up to 50 to 3200. You can't specify your fixed shutter speed here, but you can specify an exposure value adjustment, so a positive value to make the image brighter or a negative to make the image darker. And while we're doing this, it's telling us the shutter speed that it's going to set for the current lighting conditions. So if we specify -3 EV, we're going to have a shutter speed of 1/100th of a second. And if we make it really brighter to +3 EV, now we're going to get 1/25th of a shutter speed. So once you're happy with the settings, tap confirm to save those. The next setting you can change in Pro mode is the white balance. To do that, tap on the WB here, and you can choose either auto white balance. In this mode, the camera will continuously change the white balance while you're filming, which can result in weird changes in color if you're moving between different kinds of light sources. And you can currently see on the screen here what the camera thinks is the current white balance. If I just change things a little bit, you can see that white balance changing as I move things around. If you don't want auto white balance, you can hit M to change to manual white balance mode, and now you can choose a fixed white balance which won't be changed by the Pocket 3 while you're recording videos. For example, you could change this to something like 5500 Kelvin if you're recording outside and it's midday and it's a clear blue sky. Once you've decided what you want to set up, tap confirm to save. If I just scroll down, as before, we've got glamour effects, which I'm not going to go into in this video, and the next option we have is this color mode. For the color mode, we can record in normal mode. That means there's no color grading required to use the video file in editing. And if you don't know much about color grading, this is the one to use to start with for sure. The next color mode we can choose is D-Log-M. This is a low saturation, low contrast filming mode, and it does require color grading while you're editing your video to make it look normal. You can get a larger dynamic range of darker to lighter parts of the image, but there are some problems which I'll talk about in a future video. The next color mode you can choose is HLG. This gives you a wide range of colors, a wide dynamic range when it comes to dark and light areas, and it's really for display on HLG compatible TVs or monitors, but you can also use it when you're color grading. We've got this image adjustment which allows you to adjust the sharpness and noise reduction, which we've already talked about. This is separate from the non-pro mode settings. And the final thing we get access to is this focus mode. If I tap this, just rotate this so we can see it a bit better. By default, you're going to be in this continuous focus mode, and that means that the focus is always going to change to what the Pocket 3 thinks is the subject in the image. You can also change this to single focus mode. When you're in this mode, you want to tap to focus on what you want to stay focused on, and the focus will stay that way until you tap the screen again. And you can use this for things like reveals from behind a subject or subjects that stay at the same distance from the camera. We'll just confirm that and head back to the main screen. And now if I tap somewhere to autofocus, it's going to autofocus and turn yellow, but if I move things in front of the camera, because we're in single focus mode, the focus doesn't change. The third focus mode that you can choose is this product showcase mode, and this will quickly focus on things held closer to the camera while you're recording. So for example, like holding up a product if you're reviewing it. Once you've chosen a focus mode, tap confirm to save it. So that's all of the video related pro mode settings. If you tap this little icon here, you can switch over to the audio related pro mode settings. If you don't have the DJI Wireless Mic 2 attached, you have a different set of options. So we're currently using the internal mics in these settings. You can choose the channel, whether you want the audio recorded in stereo or mono in the video files that get recorded to the SD card. You have this wind noise reduction option. You can set that to on or off. This will try and reduce those nasty wind sounds while you're recording. And you also have this directional audio setting. You can set this to front and back, or all. The Pocket 3 has 3 internal microphones built into it, one on each side where there's not the screen. If you set this direction to all, it's going to record sound from all of those 3 microphones all the way around the Pocket 3. If you set this to front, it's just going to record from the front sounds. And if you set this to front and back, it's going to record only from the front and back sounds. So you can use this to help reduce wind noise and other noise. You're going to want to try a few different options depending on the situation you're filming in. Alright, if I go and reconnect my DJI Wireless Mic 2, we get a different set of options. The first thing to notice is that icon at the top changes now to tell us we're working with settings for the DJI Wireless Mic 2. Because we're only using one microphone at the minute, these 2 top options are disabled because these only really make a difference if you're using 2 microphones connected at the same time. If I just scroll down, first option we can change is this transmitter 1 gain. This affects how much the transmitter will amplify the volume of your voice before recording it in the video file. And you definitely want to set this and customize it for your own personal voice, depending on how loud or how quiet you talk. Once you've set the value that you want here, tap the back arrow to go back. If you want to mute the transmitter, turn this to on. When you do that, the red LED pulses on the DJI Mic 2, and you're also able to turn on the noise reduction for the transmitter. You can try having this turned on if you want to try and reduce annoying background noises in the audio, but you can also use noise reduction software when you're editing your video.